Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff. This week on the show, we are catching up after another week off. So we've kind of been the bi-weekly podcast a little bit lately because the world is crazy and we're all busy. But we wanted to catch up this week because there was a lot of news. We got a big Mario news dump from Nintendo. Ubisoft came out with a bunch more news this week. We learned about a new Zelda game. We got official confirmation of the dates and release dates for the next-gen Xbox, including the final unveiling of the Xbox Series S, where Microsoft's hand was finally forced by a leak to finally tell us about that fucking system that they wouldn't talk about for months. So we've got lots of little updates and stuff. I have played a significant amount of Marvel's Avengers, the new Avengers game, so we can talk about that. And yeah, just kind of a catch-up episode with some fun stuff, hopefully.
Yeah, my past 2 weeks have mostly just been drowning slowly in the crazy what it is to be a public teacher during all this horse shit that's going on. Which is why I was very right to just say, oh, we're probably not going to have a podcast next week when I said that 2 weeks ago on the show, because when it came to that weekend, I'm like, yep. Even though it was technically a 3-day weekend because it was Labor Day, there was not really a 3-day weekend. It was not. I was unfortunately not able to celebrate Labor Day in the way intended by doing jack shit. That was basically an 8-hour workday just to figure out what the fuck was happening.
I'm sorry, Sean, and I'm sorry to all our listeners who might live in California or Oregon or areas affected by the fires. That is an apocalypse on top of the apocalypse we're already living through, on top of the fascist apocalypse we're I mean, there's kind of a lot of dystopias kind of stacking up right now, Sean. You know, I think one thing we've learned that dystopian literature gets wrong is they kind of say like, oh, one thing happened, and then we're in the dystopia. No, a dystopia is like 7 things going on at once.
Yeah,
and
it's
you still have to go to work.
It's like the nuclear war. It's the fucking zombie apocalypse. It's the alien invasion. It's like the mole people have risen up. It's all of those things are basically happening at the same time as actually how the apocalypse occurs.
Yeah, so, you know, it's been another tough fucking couple of weeks, and, you know, hopefully we can give you some laughs and talk about some games and have a good time for a couple hours here on the show where we talk about stupid entertainment shit, because, you know, we still got to do that, right, Sean?
Yes, because, you know, video games, it feels like we're getting way more video game news now than we did in not E3 2020. Am I wrong with that impression? It feels like this is way more substantive. The shit has happened in the past 2 to 3 weeks than we got for almost the entirety of June and July.
Certainly, like, in terms of all at once, because just my outline today is the biggest Nintendo news dump we've had all year. A big Ubisoft news thing that is roughly in size to what they did at their other Ubisoft Forward thing.
Yeah.
And pretty substantial news from Microsoft. I mean, the unveiling of a whole new console, the Series S, which, like...
Yeah, utterly unheard of. Nobody had any idea it was coming. It was just, what a surprise, the Xbox Series S.
So, you know, a lot. And next week, I mean, this will be part of our news, is we're going to have the big PS5 unveiling. So you know, there's a lot going on, Sean. And I agree. Like I think the summer... just clearly a lot of news got pushed back. Because I think certainly from Nintendo, that seems to be the case. So yeah. So let's do the Plaguecast really quick, Sean. I have some stories. Do you want to tell us anything about how it's been working amidst the coronavirus fuckery?
Yeah, because the last time we had a podcast 2 weeks ago, I think I had done 1 week of remote teaching. So basically how our school went about it, and this is like the whole district went this way, was we did 2 weeks of remote learning, and then 1 week, or so far we have had 1 week of hybrid, which is basically your classes are cut in half based on the alphabet, or theoretically in half. They're cut based on the alphabet, so it's like A through K, and then L through Z in terms of last names. That is not an even split in the slightest. That A through K is like, my classes are like 5 to 8 people, and the L through Z, that's like 10 to 15 people. So I don't know. It is pretty consistently. I'm not sure why. We didn't maybe go like L to L or A to L or something, just to like even that out a little bit. But in theory, the hybrid is your classes are split. And so one half is in the classroom with you, and the other half of that class is at home doing remote stuff, which you can handle in a lot of different ways. And so that's part of why we didn't do a podcast last week, is that weekend was a lot of me trying to figure out the practicalities of how you do that, because nobody's ever, I'm sure there are places in the world that have done something that is vaguely like this at some point in the past, but nobody in our district, nobody at our school has ever had experience implementing a schedule like this. And it seems like nobody had any fucking clue how it would actually work. So everyone has to come up with their own answers, basically, on how you execute that in a class, especially considering you're given no additional resources to do so. And so what has ended up happening, and I hadn't really sort of fully realized that this is how this kind of ends up having to work, is that you're basically just teaching every lesson twice in person, right? And having some sort of remote thing that they can do that expands on the learning you're doing in class. But I have 4 different sections of freshmen, Jonathan, just regular. I'm basically I have over 100 freshman students. I'm like the dumping ground for freshmen English. And so they just gave them all to me. So I have 4 sections of that, which means that I teach the same lesson 2 times for each of those sections in a week, which means I teach the same lesson, Jonathan, 8 times to 9th graders in 1 week, which is so incredibly exhausting, especially when it is an entire week, Jonathan. Imagine this hell. An entire week where every single day in that school week is the first day of school, because that's what it is. Every single day is that group of students' first time being in the building, and they're freshmen. So it's literally their first time being in the building at all. So every single class with freshmen they're like 3 minutes late because they don't know where your room is. They're all nervous because they've never really been in high school before. And it's every single day, a whole week. And your lesson is we did a couple of stuff of going over how you use the library, because there's all these we have a digital library thing that we do and all this stuff. So it's a very dull, necessarily dull kind of first day of school-esque lesson to get through a lot of technicalities we need. So it was the most boring week of teaching I have had so far.
That is cruel and unusual punishment for you. That is, as far as I feel like I know you pretty well, I don't think you deserve that. I don't think I would wish that on most of my worst enemies. That should be barred by the Geneva Convention, teaching 8 lessons the 8 of the same lesson to freshmen in 1 week. That is terrifying to me. I have to do 3 discussion sections that have to be basically the same thing, and I get a little exhausted by the end of the 3rd one. If I had to do that 8 times, I would blow my brains out. I think that's wild.
Yeah, but Jonathan, if you want to know how to use the digital Follett library database, I am a certified expert, because I've talked about it 8 times, of course, the past week, and I got very, very good at guiding people through how to access that fucking database.
Well, good. I mean, I'm sure. I hope your students appreciate it. Is all I can say.
It's part of the weird experience of it, is having the combination of smaller class sizes, having students sit apart from each other, them all wearing face masks, and them being 14 years old with all those conditions. I'm really curious how this year is going to go in terms of classroom behavior stuff, because usually with freshmen they are fairly unmanageable because they're so hyper, unless you have them first period. And so this semester I don't foresee that being a problem. I'm anticipating the opposite problem, that they're all too fucking terrified to participate in class, which was my experience with some of those sections of getting my usual teaching style is fairly laid back, relaxed. I like to joke and stuff like that, which people probably could infer from the podcast that we do. And that is, your jokes do not land very well with a bunch of terrified freshmen wearing face masks, dude.
No, I mean, I found that with, I teach college freshmen, and I definitely found that as well. It's the rhythm is, I mean, for us it was, because we're in bigger rooms too, so it would be, 20 people, but spread out over a 60-person lecture hall, all in masks. I'm at the front. I'm way far away from them. I remember, so our first day of teaching, I had my lesson set up, and I had sometimes I have my pre-built jokes in that I know I'm going to do. and they just were not like landing. That I had a funny video and no one laughed, and I'm like, okay. So like between my first and second section, I was furiously like revising the PowerPoint of like more serious. People don't want this right now, and it worked better that way. Yeah, I think that's definitely happening for everyone.
Yeah, but that's basically what my week has been. I'll talk about the Control DLC that I finished. But I mean, honestly, I finished that mostly last week. It's like the whole course of the last week has just been figuring out how, because then also the consequences, like my lesson planning time is, I mean, I still have enough, but it is reduced from what I would normally have. And part of just like designing lessons so far ahead of time, because you're doing it multiple times over the course of the week, it is a very different pacing than I'm used to. So last week was mostly just figuring out how all this stuff works, and then talking about the library, and then trying to figure out how anything's going to work, and then talking about the library over and over again.
Yeah. All right. Here's my Plaguecast. So I was finally able to switch to doing online teaching this week, but I need to tell the saga of that. So we are still, our caseload at the University of Iowa has slowed down a bit since we last did a podcast, but it is still high. We're in the high thousands. We're going to hit 2,000 this week, 2,000 cases among the student body. The university is being very obstinate. I, at this point, do not think they are going to shut down without some huge spike beyond what we've already had, which could very well happen, but they seem to be pretty obstinate, as evidenced by a email we got last week, Sean, it was like their weekly like COVID update, where they had the most spectacularly disingenuous paragraph I've ever read in the English language, which was, they had this section where they're like, there's this part on like classroom transmission, and they're like, oh, okay, we want to learn about classroom transmission. And they said, luckily, like, even though we're having a slightly high caseload among the student body, we know, and they said this as a certainty, we know there has been no classroom transmission of COVID. And if you're thinking, well, how could you know that there's been no classroom transmission of COVID if you have 2,000 students who have COVID in the time classrooms have been open? And they're like, and we know this because there has been very little transmission among employees. And that's true. Only about 20 university employees have tested positive for COVID. And they said that is evidence that there isn't transmission in classrooms, because employees would be teaching in the classrooms, and if there was classroom transmission, then employees wouldn't get it. Now, Sean, do you want to quickly tell us the logical problem with that right off the bat before I give you more information?
I mean, like, the obvious thing is that, you know, the teacher, whoever is, like, teaching the class, is the least likely to be infected by a student that would be in the class, because you are farther away. You are up at the front of the room. And especially in a college context, you're not, like, walking around and talking with them one-on-one and, like, checking their work the way you can in high school. So, yeah, I would expect there to be a significantly lower rate of transmission to the faculty than I would among the student body. Like, that would be an anticipated phenomena of the data set.
Yes, absolutely. Also, employees are a fraction of that. In a classroom, there's one teacher and 20 students.
Yes,
so,
you'd have to have that one case of infection to hit the teacher, whereas there are 20 plus different people that could potentially be infected to be another instance of transmission amongst the student body.
Yeah, so this is already horse shit. So I made a joke about this on her. I'm like, this is fucking horseshit. And then I got a letter from my union, noted, because the union, COGS, which is our grad student union, was so infuriated by this email, they sent out a big press blast. Because guess who is not counted among employees, Sean? Grad student TAs. So, just so you know,
you mean like the largest percentage of the employees at the university are not employees, apparently?
Yes. So they are counting grad students who have gotten COVID among students, not among employees. And we know for a fact that the vast majority of teaching faculty who are working on campus are grad students, because most lectures and things like that are being done online. The vast majority of classes still being done in person are discussion sections, recitations, done by grad student teaching assistants. And those are not counted among employees. So basically what they're saying is, yeah, there's been no COVID by all the people who are allowed to work from home and not come to campus. So, like, that is so disingenuous. I feel like like that's worthy of like a lawsuit or something. Like that is such bald-faced lying to your student population. It's insane. And all of this to try to bolster their claim that, yeah, you can't get COVID in a classroom. Wild, huh?
Wow.
That's
That's pretty heavy. That's a lot.
Because here's the thing, Sean. 1 week ago, when we didn't have a podcast last week, so I teach Fridays. So Friday, this was our second week in person, and I did all 3 of my discussion sections. I go home the next morning. By the time I wake up at like 9 or 10, and by the time I wake up, I already have an email with, if a student in my classes tests positive for COVID and self-reports, because remember, they have to self-report, the university emails me. And I got an email overnight saying, hey, one of your students has tested positive for COVID. The first thing I do is scramble out of bed, go over to my computer, open my Excel spreadsheet of my attendance, and I'm like, was this kid in class yesterday? Because I didn't remember off the top of my head, and he was. So there was a kid in class who had COVID actively, who was in one of my classes, who, and he didn't know it at the time. He tested positive afterwards, I guess. And yeah, so we had one class where 21 people were susceptible to catching the virus. And at this point, I'm like, well, this is horseshit. This is scary. This is bad. For the last week, Sean, I went and bought a thermometer and have been, just testing my temperature every day, just because that's one of the first things that'll happen if you have it. I feel like that's the best early warning sign I can come up with, I'm okay so far, and there hasn't been any more transmission in my class that I know of, but it can take some more time to present. But anyway, I also run the numbers on, okay, how many of my students have tested positive, and how many students do I have? And I update my attendance with people who have dropped. So I have 50 students at present, and 5, as of that day, had tested positive. I had 10% of my students had COVID. So at this point, I'm like, well, this is just bad. So I start emailing people. I email my professor, who I teach with, and I email the head of my department and say, like, look, this is ridiculous. We can't keep doing this in person. This is criminally negligent. This is not your guys' fault. I'm emailing them because, I work with them. They don't make these decisions. And I'm like, what options do we have? And so anyway, long story short, I got the go-ahead. Me and the other TA in this class, the professor has decided we're going to be moving online for at least 3 weeks through the end of September, and just doing our discussion sections over Zoom. It's supposed to be a hybrid course. The university wants at least 50% face-to-face in-person instruction, but we're going to revisit that in October and frankly just going to fudge it if we have to, because it's just clearly not safe. That was if no one got COVID out of that class, that's a close call, it just is. And so, yeah, so then I had like 2 days to scramble and figure out, like, well, how am I going to set this up for Zoom? And I had to do a lot of tests. My new laptop doesn't have a webcam, and I usually use my iPad, and that's fine. But for this, like, if I'm teaching, I just needed more, space on my screen and stuff. So I went and bought a webcam. I was testing all these things. I was like one of the things, Sean, is it's a film class. I have to show clips. How do I show clips over Zoom? Testing all these different things. And then it went fine. I mean, honestly, on Friday when I taught, what was so interesting is that the Zoom version of the class, completely remote, went better than it had in person. It just did. It was, people talked more, people seemed more relaxed, we had a better overall discussion, and I think it's because of a couple things. One, everyone's just a little more relaxed, not being in person, spread out to a crazy distance, masked up, nervous because they're out in public. All of that was removed. Everyone was relaxed and at home and fine. We had more attendance because people who were self-isolating could come. All of that. Plus, and I've heard this from other teachers, that sometimes if you have kids who don't like to talk in person for whatever reason, they will talk more over Zoom, and that was very true. And one of the big things I like to do is break students into groups and do activities. Can't do that in person right now because I'm actually not allowed to have them move around the room. So in Zoom, you can do the breakout rooms. So it all went better, and now we feel kind of good. But it kind of goes back to what you were saying, Sean, last time we talked, of like, well, God, if we would have made this decision before the semester started, I would have had so much more time to prepare, and I could have made it even better, Yeah. And instead, we were aiming for this goal that we knew with certainty wasn't going to work out, and now we're having to scramble, and that's not good for anyone. So, God, the University of Iowa, just, again, Bruce Harreld, our president, needs to go fuck himself. All the people who sent that email need to go fuck themselves. It's bad here, Sean.
Yep, it's bad everywhere. But man, yeah, like 10% within that class, because we have not had a confirmed case of a student in the building who has tested positive for COVID-19 so far. I mean, it's only been 1 week, but we do have a attendance thing of if the student is like in close contact with someone who has tested positive with COVID-19, they're excused effectively from class, and they have like a special mark in their attendance. And I think I have about 5 students across my 6 periods that I teach, but I teach probably like 140 something plus, maybe almost 150. Like, it's a lot of students this semester, for obvious reasons, because we have some students that are teachers that are remote, and so the population gets split up in a weird way. But like, so percentage wise, just in terms of students that we know have been potentially exposed, is pretty small. So like, knowing this, like, man, here's the number of people who have confirmed tested positive in the classroom is 10%. That is a thing that it feels like you send an email to like the upper echelon at the university, and they're like, okay, we're shutting the whole thing down, because that would be the sane, responsible thing to do. Is if even one classroom would have a confirmed rate of 10% of the students in there have it, you should shut the whole fucking university down immediately, because of the incredible potential risk to people involved, and the fact that they're very far away from doing anything like that it seems utterly insane to me.
Yeah, I mean, and we're not doing anything else preventative, like you shared a bunch of stuff your school's doing preventatively. We're not doing any random testing. We're not doing any asymptomatic testing whatsoever. We're doing no random sample testing. We're doing no temperature checks to come in the door. None of that stuff. So it's purely on, we will only know when and if people become symptomatic. It's basically go with God. And it's all a big scam. Like, that's what I think people need to understand about higher education right now. The scam is get people in, say, hey, we're going to have it, you're going to do a little online, but it's mostly normal. You're going to live in the dorms, and you're going to go to class, and you're going to have the college experience. And then once there's the outbreak a couple weeks in, whether the university formally shuts down or not, teachers like me and the people I work with are going to be like, well, I'm not risking my lives or the lives of my students. We're doing this online. Fuck you, university. And then eventually, the freshman students, and I know most of my students are in this boat, are in their dorms, but 100% of their education is online, which means they didn't need to move into the dorms, they didn't need to take out tens of thousands of dollars in loans, and all of it exists so that the colleges can get the money and run, basically. And you can talk about the fucked up incentive structures for that, because we have underfunded public education at all levels in this country, especially since the Great Recession, but that's what's going on.
Yeah, because that is the other part that is the most infuriating thing about it, is thinking about all the stuff that our district is doing, which again it's not absolutely perfect, but they're doing their best trying to figure out ways to screen and get people in with the resources we have. But the resources and like the level of funding that my school has access to is so paltry compared to what the fucking University of Iowa could leverage to, again, just like the fact that you're not doing mandatory temperature checks when people are entering buildings on the campuses. That's madness. That is utter madness, Jonathan, that you had to get your own thermometer and do that on your own just to be personally responsible, and that the school is not doing that, because that's the first thing anybody does when we enter our school. And we have multiple entrances set up that different people, like if you're a freshman, you go to one entrance, so on and so forth. And the first thing you do when you come in, including all teachers, is take your temperature and mark it down on a sheet with like a quick questionnaire of like the common symptoms of COVID-19, whether you have them or not. Like, that basic level of temperature screening it shouldn't even be a thing that someone has to say that should be something that should be happening on the fucking University of Iowa campus.
Where I should point out, we have one of the biggest hospital networks in the country. We are a teaching medical hospital. Famously, we have a giant medical campus in walking distance from where I work. I mean, this is bullshit. So.
Yep, it's bullshit.
All right. Well, you want to talk about some stuff?
Yeah, let's talk about stuff, Jonathan.
Well, I've been playing a couple games. I'm going to talk about Avengers in a little bit, and you've played at least some of the beta, so you can talk with me about that. I wanted to quickly mention that I'm not going to talk about this a ton today, but maybe later I will. I did pick up as well Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2, the remake that came out.
Cool.
That game is ludicrously good, Sean.
Those are great games.
Those are great games. It's a phenomenal remake. It is, mechanically pretty much the same as the originals, although to my understanding, because I've played those, but it's been a very long time. They've added some of I think manuals were not in the original Pro Skater 1, and then those have been added back in, and then they've adjusted the scoring because you can get higher scores with those. So a couple of little tweaks like that, but it's basically how you remember it. It's graphically really gorgeous. This is a full remake. It's top to bottom graphical upgrade, and it's really nice. It's got some of the best HDR I've seen in a video game. It runs great. I have it on my PC, actually. I got it from the Epic Games Store because I had a coupon there. And it's really well optimized. I can basically run that thing on my TV in native 4K, rock solid 60 FPS, ultra settings. It's really, really well optimized. And it's just so much fun. It is so I've been playing it a bunch. My brother's been playing it. We've been doing some of the multiplayer, and now I'm in down the loophole of watching Tony Hawk videos on YouTube as well, which is very fun. And one of the things you see with all that is skating is this kind of interesting sport in that there's competitive skating, but I feel like the atmosphere around it is a lot of trial and error and hanging out and trying to figure out what kind of tricks you can do, and there's nominally competition, but people are excited to see what their competitors can pull off. You see that in a lot of Tony Hawk's famous clips and stuff like that. And I think the games really foster that same sense of I just want, I'm very bad at these games. I'm horrible at them. They're very hard for me. But I still have a ton of fun with them because it kind of fosters that of most of the time you're going to fall on your fucking ass playing this game, just like you would in real life skating. But just have fun with it and just fuck around, and they give you lots of objectives in the campaign, and some of them are skill based and some of them are just go fuck around, and they're really they foster just a lot of fun out of it, and I think that's really key to this kind of game, and it's why they're so memorable. I mean, honestly, Sean, if I don't think I'll include this on my top 10 list because it is a pretty straight remake. But if I could, this would be Game of the Year caliber kind of stuff. It is just a masterpiece of a game, and I really recommend if you enjoy the old Tony Hawk games, or if you've never touched them, they're so fun, and this is such a cool package. And I hope they continue and do 3 and 4 as well, the other good ones, because that would be really cool. I did also, before I get to Avengers, Sean, I wanted to touch on, I have fallen down the very fun rabbit hole of watching a bunch of the DC animated movies.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. Because DC animated movies are very good. I caught up on a couple of the classics, like Under the Red Hood. Under the Red Hood is one of the best Batman movies. It's better than the vast majority of the live-action movies. Under the Red Hood, also I like it because it is, I think, the Batman story I've seen that most calls Batman on his bullshit. It is very much a story about, Batman's rigidity to his own moral code being his greatest hypocrisy and failing, and the movie not coming up with most Batman movies or stories get to that, but then find a way to kind of let Batman off the hook and prove him right in the end. And that movie just resolutely no. You come away feeling kind of sick out of that movie, and it is very good.
Yeah, Under the Red Hood is absolutely fantastic. It is also one... I think most of the DC animated movies stand fairly well on their own, but sometimes you need, I think, a little bit, if you're going for a Green Lantern movie or something like that, you maybe need a little bit more familiarity with the character. But anybody has enough familiarity with Batman to just be able to watch Under the Red Hood. It is amazing. It is one where also I think it is markedly better than the story arc from the comic book that it adapts, which is good. But it has a lot of bullshit in it, and Under the Red Hood cuts out all the bullshit and really tightens it up into a really focused story. Because I think it's a 12-issue arc or something for when it originally ran, which was just too much. And there's all this the Jason Todd how he comes back stuff is all tied into one of the multiverse events at the time and all that kind of stuff. So even if you read that comic book arc, you're like, oh, I don't need to watch a movie that adapts it because I read the comic book. The movie's such a better version of that story.
It is. It also has one of the best non-Mark Hamill Jokers I've seen, because it's John DiMaggio, who is obviously a very prolific voice actor. Most people probably know him as Marcus Phoenix. He's great. But his Joker is one of the scarier Jokers I've heard. Like it kind of starts as a bit of a Mark Hamill impression with that same kind of like deep, high pitched voice. I don't know how else to describe it. Like it's got a lot of weight, even if it's kind of high pitched. But it goes to like deeper, darker places where it's like this guy, you get the like he is terrifyingly insane, but also calculating. It's very good. And yeah, it's a great movie. But then I've been watching a lot of so over from 2013 to 2020, DC had a running line in their animated. This is going to get a little confusing because they have their animated movies that have been going since like 2008 or something, and then since 2013 they started a specific continuity within those animated movies. And not every movie they made was in that continuity, but they did a couple a year, and they called it the DC AMU, the DC Animated Movie Universe. And the specific idea is this is a line of movies where it's like the same Batman in all of these movies when he shows up, the same Superman, and there's a running continuity. It technically starts with a movie called Justice League: The Flashpoint Paradox, which was at the time a standalone movie, and then later on in the DC AMU, they kind of like retroactively canonized it. But it has like completely different art style and voice cast, but it's also maybe the best movie in the whole series. The Flashpoint Paradox movie is outstanding. If you haven't, have you seen that one, Sean?
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, that one's really good. It's the Flashpoint story, and it's got like Thomas Wayne Batman, and that's just, it's a very good movie. But anyway, after that, they did a movie called Justice League War, which is like a Justice League origin story movie. So all the characters are already there, but they haven't become the Justice League yet. And then from that point...
And that's an adaptation of because a lot of this is kind of like loose adaptations of the New 52 stuff.
Right.
So that one specifically is an adaptation of the first arc from the New 52 Justice League.
Yes. So yeah, basically the DC AMU is the DC's New 52 universe. So you get, like, Justice League War is a Jeff Johns Justice League story. A lot of them are from the Jeff Johns run on Justice League. At Batman, at one point, they do Court of Owls. They do Damian Wayne. Damian Wayne actually is like one of the main recurring characters because he comes in Son of Batman, which is the second movie in the series. And then he's in all the Batman movies. He's in the Teen Titans movies. He's in some of the Justice League movies. And he's awesome. I had never seen a Damian Wayne story before, but he's a really cool character. But yeah, I'm about halfway through that run. There's 16 movies total in the DC AMU. It just ended a couple months ago. They released a movie called Justice League Dark Apocalypse War, which is the finale to that whole run of movies. So it's a close-ended thing if you want to watch them. And they're really good. There's only been one movie I outright disliked so far, and that's Justice League Throne of Atlantis, which is just the most boring, bog-standard Aquaman origin story you could imagine. And it's just very bad. It's basically like the live-action Aquaman, but imagine if Jason Momoa was a can of mayonnaise and there was no personality in it at all, and it's just very, very bad. Just go watch the live-action Aquaman movie. That's fine. So, yeah. Other than that, though, they're all pretty good. The Batman... Obviously, most of the movies are, like, Batman-centric because Batman sells the most videos.
Yeah.
But their Batman is really good. He's voiced by Jason O'Mara, and I love this Batman. It's kind of the first non-Kevin Conroy Batman voice I've heard that isn't doing a Kevin Conroy impression. And I really like that. He really builds his own Batman, where like his Batman has a very narrow range of like emotion, but within that it's like he's got a very controlled voice, but you can start to hear like the nuances of like the different levels of emotion Batman will pull off, and that just feels like it's a very calculated performance, and I really, really like it. And all the Batman movies are really good. Batman versus Robin, which is the Court of Owls movie, is the best Batman-centric story in this line so far. It's fantastic. I like all the stuff with Damian Wayne. The Justice League itself is kind of a little boring. So I don't really love their Superman, which is voiced by Jerry O'Connell, and he just kind of has no personality. But other than that, like Green Lantern is done by Nathan Fillion. That one's fun. They have Rosario Dawson as Wonder Woman. I like Rosario Dawson voicing Wonder Woman a lot. But yeah, the last movie I watched last night, Sean, was Justice League Dark. Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen the movie, but I'm pretty sure that's also a New 52 adaptation, and I've read that comic back when it came out.
Yeah. It's maybe the best movie in the DC AMU. I don't know if it's the best DC animated movie overall, because that might be like Under the Red Hood or Flashpoint Paradox, but Justice League Dark, which is John Constantine, and then like Swamp Thing. I'm not going to remember other names. Yeah, Zatanna,
Dead Man. feel like there's someone else. But yeah, it's
There's
all
a
the
dude-
like occultish kind of DC characters, and a lot of them are a little bit less. I mean, none of them are like Batman level or Superman
Yeah.
level characters.
But it's really good. The Justice League Dark movie is everyone. You don't need to see the rest of the DCAMU. It's very standalone. Everyone should watch it. It's one of the best DC things I've ever seen. The Constantine in that movie. This is kind of a funny thing that's been happening. There's an actor named Matt Ryan who played Constantine in the 2014 short-lived half-season NBC show Constantine, which was basically they made a police procedural and put Constantine in it. And my sense is people didn't love that show, but they really loved Matt Ryan as Constantine. So he's like, even though that show only lasted 13 episodes, he is still playing Constantine. He is playing him in live action on Legends of Tomorrow, the CW show. He's a main cast member in that, and they've retroactively like made Constantine part of the Arrowverse on the CW, and then he voices Constantine in all the DC animated movies. He's done it 3 or 4 times now, and his Constantine is indeed fucking fantastic. It's just a great version of that character, who I had never seen a ton of before, and I really came out of that movie like, yeah, I want to see more Constantine stuff. That's really fun, and it's like leans into the weirdness, all the crazy occult stuff. It's wild. I love it. Felix Faust is one of the villains in it. It's very silly. It's very dark. It's really good. And apparently Guillermo del Toro has been trying, he's been working with Warner Brothers for a while on and off, talking about doing a Justice League Dark movie. That sounds like the best idea for a comic movie I've ever heard. Mm-hmm. Let Guillermo del Toro do Justice League Dark. I just knowing like his Hellboy movies especially, he would knock that out of the fucking park. That would be so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. They should get Keanu Reeves back, have him play Constantine again from the probably not often remembered. Was that like 2005 or something? It's an old movie at this point.
No, yeah. I mean, I think they should just probably get Matt Ryan because he's done it a ton in the last 5 years.
You can get them both. You can do some weird multiverse stuff. Have Matt Ryan Constantine meet Keanu Reeves Constantine.
There you go. It'd be fun. Yeah, so, I'm having fun. The DC animated stuff is good. And it's a reminder for me, like, Marvel is, like, what gets all the attention in the movies, and therefore it gets a lot of attention from us, Sean, because it's what's in theaters a couple times a year. I mostly engage with DC stuff, though. Like, I've never bought and read a Marvel comic book. I've mostly read DC stuff. I've grew up watching DC animated shows like Batman. Games have been better on like the Batman side of things in general until recently we got like, Spider-Man and Avengers. And so it's just like, it made me like, I'm watching all this and I'm like thinking like, God, I wish they could get their shit together in live action. And maybe they're starting to, is from what we're seeing. But like, because I'm like, there's a lot of characters I really love and there's a lot of wacky shit that you could do a lot of fun stuff with in the movies. Because it's a very rich universe of cool shit. So anyway.
Have you watched Batman versus the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles yet?
No, I have not gotten to that one yet.
That one's very good. That was the last one I watched. Because I tend to watch them kind of like periodically, and then every couple of years, there's a bunch of them have stocked up. I'm like, okay, time for me to just like take a week or two and just watch a bunch of these because they're very fun. And yeah, that was the last one I watched, and I remember thinking like, man, I forgot that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are like really cool when they're done well, and that movie does them very well.
Yeah, I need to watch that one. I would definitely recommend, Sean, just doing like the whole DCAMU is very fun because it's just a very fluid 16 movies. It's kind of like watching a TV show, and you just get
I've
that
seen about half of them, I think, because I definitely have seen a bunch of the Damian Wayne ones. I've seen some of the ones with him in the Teen Titans. So I think somewhere like around the middle point of those, I ended up, I'm like about at the point for me to start watching a bunch of them again.
Yeah, because that's finished also, so there's an end point. And then the most recent DC movie, I actually bought this on Blu-ray last week, was the new Superman movie, Man of Tomorrow, which is kind of like the kickoff to a new continuity. And that one's fun. It's not a great movie, but it is a Superman origin story where his first opponent is Lobo, and Martian Manhunter is his buddy, and they fight Parasite, who basically becomes a giant kaiju, and it's a kaiju movie at the end. It's good. I actually liked it a lot, even if it's not like great. It's a solid like new Superman movie. It's got Damian Chris as Superman, very good Superman voice. It has Zachary Quinto as Lex Luthor, and that's such good casting that whenever they do Lex Luthor in live action again, just get Zachary Quinto and have him shave his head. That's like the perfect Lex Luthor. If you wanted to do like younger Lex Luthor, much, much better than fucking Jesse Eisenberg Lex. So, although anything would be. So yeah, these movies are fun. I'm glad there's like a thriving slate of DC movies to go watch. If you were thinking about the Justice League Zack Snyder cut and just being despondent about how fucked up all that is, go watch the animated stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
So you want to tell us about Control?
Yes, so the second big expansion for Control, the Alan Wake expansion, AWE, which is what it's called. It's supposed to stand for Altered World Event, which is like a fictional concept in the world of Control. But I really want to believe that Remedy, back when they came up with, like, they were charting out how they're going to do the expansions, they're like, well, we want to do an Alan Wake one. We have the rights to Alan Wake. We want to bring that character back because it's kind of a cult classic game. And they're like, well, what are we going to do? And someone's like, oh, let's just come up with this dumb fucking acronym. So that way, when we announce the expansion pack, we can show the acronym and everyone will just know immediately, oh, okay, it's the Alan Wake expansion. And that's basically what it is. It is definitely, I think, not as good as the first expansion because that one felt a little bit newer in the sense of the Alan Wake expansion takes place in a new wing of the oldest house called the investigation sector, and there's a lot of fun stuff there, but all the aesthetics of it are very much the same kind of weird brutalist mixed with 50s office architecture thing that the whole base game Control had. And the first DLC was set in this elaborate series of like kind of tunnels and caves running underneath the oldest house that had this really unique, it's like red and white aesthetic that was really gorgeous. It had kind of more different powers and stuff associated with it. This one feels like narratively it is a side story, so it's not narratively tying into anything from the main game, but the design of the areas and the encounters and stuff feel almost like a section pulled out of the original game, like put back into it. So I kind of wish it had a little bit more new going for it in that regard, but a lot of the like weird mystique and the strange corners of this universe that you explore, all of that is still there in full force. The Alan Wake stuff is really interesting because I'd never really played Alan Wake, so I watched a like 30-minute YouTube video explaining Alan Wake and American Nightmare, which was the like half sequel they made on Xbox Live Arcade. And I kind of really wish that they would just re-release Alan Wake at this point because it seems like that game's pretty cool. But it's a lot of Alan Wake is very like Stephen King influenced. The character Alan Wake is a Stephen King-esque novelist who goes to the Pacific Northwest, this like small town, and gets wrapped up in weird events. And then eventually he's effectively trapped in like a sort of alternative reality where the things that he imagines and creates as a novelist affect reality, and he's sort of stuck in this weird other dimension. And he's left, and that's kind of like the cliffhanger that he is left on. And so in this DLC, very early on, basically as soon as you go into the elevator and press the button to go to the investigation sector that they open up for the DLC, you get a big like weird vision of Alan Wake and this like the live action, the actual actor who plays Alan Wake, and he's like typing at a typewriter and he's sort of narrating in a really well written Stephen King-esque kind of excessive, very heavy horror prose the events of what's happening, and he's kind of leading you on your way as you're kind of trying to figure out what's going on with him. And so all of that stuff, and whenever Alan Wake pops in and gives his weird narration, or you go to the Ocean View Motel, which is a sort of weird Twin Peaks-ish Red Room-esque area from the original game, and Alan Wake is there like kind of in these weird visions and stuff. And anytime it's approaching that element where reality feels like fungible and you're kind of peeking into this weird dimension that Alan Wake is trapped in a way that reminds me of a kind of watered down version of all of the Cooper stuff from the beginning of Twin Peaks The Return, where he's kind of like talking to himself and reality's kind of folding in on itself. It's not as extreme as that, but it's got a little bit of that vibe. That stuff is really, really engaging and really interesting. And I wish it ended on a slightly stronger note because it kind of feels like it's ending in a way that they don't want to be too definitive, because I feel like Remedy really, really wants to make an Alan Wake 2. It feels like because they've been trying to get that game made for like 12 years at this point. Alan Wake came out in 2008. And it feels like they didn't want to do so much that they'd kind of close off that character in a way. So it feels like this was a way to be like, hey, people really like Control. Like, this game is very popular, and it won a bunch of Game of the Year awards and stuff like that. And if we put Alan Wake in this, maybe someone will finally fund our fucking Alan Wake 2 because we really want to make that. And so it kind of, I think, hurts this DLC a little bit because it doesn't have a really strong end point. But it does set up a sort of vibe in a direction, I think, either in Alan Wake 2 or a Control 2 or whatever else Remedy wants to do in this weird sort of shared universe thing that they've got going on now. I think that they could do something really fun with that. So this expansion, I think if you really liked Control, it is definitely worth playing. If you were kind of like a little bit on the edge with Control and maybe you played the first DLC and when you finish that one, you're like, I think I'm good with this. I don't know if it's necessarily a must play unless you're already heavily invested. But if you are heavily invested, it does have a lot of great stuff because it also has a bunch of side missions and like there's a weird, you get to find out about I forget what they're called, but it's like an influenced item or an altered item that came from the moon. The astronauts went to the moon and they came back, and when they came back, they had a thing with them that they didn't have when they left, and nobody knows how it got there. And there's a whole side quest related to that I think is really fun and really cleverly put in. So yeah, it's really fun. Not quite as good as the first DLC, but I am fully invested in whatever Remedy wants to do with this weird fucking thing they've got going on with these games now.
Yeah, Sean, I still need to play this game. I really want to. There's too many games out, but eventually I will play it. It's on PC now. The Ultimate Edition that it was on PC forever, but it was on the Epic Game Store. They did the Ultimate Edition on Steam, which is cheaper now, and it's already having a bunch of sales. So I might pick it up on here because my laptop can do some ray tracing, which I know that game uses a lot of. Or I might just hold off for the new consoles.
Yeah, if you get an next-gen console, I imagine that version probably is going to be pretty cool.
Yeah. So, but I will want to play it at some point. It sounds neat. Well, can I talk about a game I was not expecting to play?
Yes.
And that is Marvel's Avengers, which I think the last time we talked, Sean, I was like, yeah, that's not a game I'm going to play. And I don't know if I can fully explain why I picked this game up other than, and this relates to like my overall thesis of the game, once like reviewers were able to start talking about it, it became very clear to me, oh, this is not exactly the game they've been advertising. Like, it is Destiny-esque in a ton of ways, and it does have the loot grind and the multiplayer and all that, but it also has this dedicated single-player campaign with a story and its own, like, Kamala Khan is not original to this game, but she has not been in, like, film media before. And like it has its own like central character who's not in the movies, and apparently the story's pretty good. And like I kind of wanted to play a new game. I had not played like a new AAA game in a while. I had some Steam credit on my PC, so when it came out, I decided to pick it up and just give it a try. I hadn't done like a new AAA game on my laptop yet, and I always thought it would be fun to kind of put it through its paces and see what that was like. So I wound up playing Avengers, and I've played about 25 hours of it now, and I really like this game. With a couple of giant asterisks. It is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I don't know if I would call it a great game. It's definitely not a great game. But it is a surprisingly good one, and I think the number one thing I just want to say to any listeners who have heard us talk about it before, it's not the game I was expecting, and I don't really think it's the game Square Enix has been pitching, because all the Square Enix advertising really focused around like the multiplayer, four-person, Destiny-esque, like, you know, loot grind thing of the game, and like played it fairly coy with the story other than something happened on a bridge in San Francisco and then the Avengers broke up and they have to come back together. But like I remember the E3 unveiling last year, Sean, did it even show Kamala Khan? I don't think they even...
No, I think there was a trailer that had narration from a character that they then later said, oh, that narration is Kamala Khan. She's going to be the main character of the game. But they didn't show her. And then also, like, just to that point of, like, how they've kind of marketed the game as the big Destiny thing, I mean, that's what basically the beta was. The beta had the tutorial mission. It had one mission later where you played as Kamala and Hulk that had no context associated with it, so you didn't get any story stuff. And also, from what I understand, and I think I said this when I talked about the beta, the tutorial mission on the Golden Gate Bridge had clearly was like cut around the edges to remove all the Kamala Khan stuff, because she obviously, that was a thing. Like clearly she is like the character you are introduced to all this stuff with, because she's like in the corners of some cutscenes, but you don't have any context for it. So they like removed all of that narrative context, and then once you did those 2 missions, it was all just grindy. Go do the same thing over and over again, fight the giant robot, get like slightly better pants for the Hulk that aren't actually pants that the Hulk puts on. And that is how the beta was structured. So the beta specifically sold it as a Destiny-style co-op game.
Which is definitely in there. It's not that it's not that, it's that it's more than that. And I think the most baffling thing is Square choosing to like basically cut Kamala Khan out of the marketing is one of the most baffling things I've ever seen. Because, like, it needs to be said, when you load up Avengers, especially for the first time, you come to the main screen, there are 3 options. There's settings on the right, and then there is campaign and Avengers Initiative. And if you click on Avengers Initiative, it tells you, hey, this is the post-game multiplayer. You shouldn't play this until you've done the campaign. And so right away, that's a big difference from something like Destiny. There is 2 modes, and you go into campaign, and it kicks you into a cutscene, and it is a pretty linear story that took me about 18 hours to beat, where you start with Kamala Khan. She is your POV character. There is that first mission on the Golden Gate Bridge, but you see it through her eyes, and then when the action starts, you do briefly play as all the other Avengers, but then you come back to her, and then it is her journey as she goes around 5 years later. The world's kind of dystopic because in the fall, after the fall of the Avengers, an evil corporation called AIM, I don't remember what the acronym stands for, has come into being, and I think the villain is Moloch, or whatever his name is.
MODOK. What does MODOK stand for? It's hilarious. It's like I've like machine only designed for killing or something like that. It's a great acronym. Yeah. It's been a while since I did any MODOK stuff in
It's an acronym
Marvel
for
Comics.
mental, mobile, mechanized. The M can stand for any of those. So let's say mechanized organism designed only for killing.
Yes, that's it.
Yes. So MODOK is the main villain. He is running AIM, and AIM has like so AIM has risen, and then also because of the events of A-Day, the Inhumans were created, and Kamala Khan is one of those. And this is from someone filled me in on this on Twitter because I had no idea. I only knew the Inhumans as like the race of the alien family people, but apparently back in like 2013 when Marvel stopped publishing X-Men comics because they were being petty about the Fox deal, they remember when Fox wasn't owned by Disney, Sean? Yeah. Anyway, but yes, they were being petty, so instead of having X-Men, they did a thing where the Inhumans came to Earth and their DNA got in the ether or something, and then a bunch of basically mutants were created, and they were called, instead of the mutants like in X-Men, they were called the Inhumans. And in the Avengers game, it's the A-Day thing, some big explosion happens, and then the Inhumans are created, and Kamala Khan is one of those, and AIM is cracking down on Inhumans. So, like, that's how it starts, and then Kamala runs away from home and goes to try to like find the Avengers, and she finds Hulk first, and then you and Hulk get together, and like the mission you would have played, Sean, in the beta is like the first time she and Hulk go out in the field together, and then from that point on you find the other Avengers, and then you go and fight MODOK and all of that stuff. And the campaign introduces you to like all the basic mechanics, so you do eventually get like the war table, which is like the Destiny galactic map or whatever you have where you can go select your missions. But in the campaign, it's like at some points there's like, side quests and stuff you can do, but there is a main campaign it's shuttling you through, and there are some points where if you want to play with other people multiplayer, you can. And you can like open matchmaking, or you could invite a friend. But there's also plenty of missions that are single player, and no matter what, you can play. And this is true in the multiplayer too. You never in Avengers have to play with other people if you don't want to. You can always play with AI companions, and the AI companions are surprisingly efficient. They are not in like a high level fight the best you will have, but they are very responsive to picking you up when you go down, which is very good for a game like this, because usually your AI companions suck at that. And they are pretty good in this game at it. So yeah, you can just play. There is a single-player campaign with a story with a beginning, middle, and end, and you can just play it. And it is its own sequestered mode, and when you finish that, Then you want to go into the Avengers Initiative, and it'll retain all the like leveling and gear you did, but now there's a bunch of new stuff on the map, and there's new sort of like there's more post-game story content, like going up and cleaning up. Like a big one is Maria Hill from Shield comes in pretty late in the campaign, and then I just finished the Shield quest line today in Avengers Initiative, which is a series of quests where you help Shield rebuild. So that is the kind of structure of the game, and I think Square Enix really did themselves a disservice by not selling this, because that's what made me interested in it, and it is much more inviting than like a Destiny or something. I think at least as like starting out, when it's just like not it's not quite the same, because Destiny, you were never getting into it just for the story. But like when you call a game Avengers, you want the characters in the story. You don't just want a kind of like Destiny grind fest. And that's there eventually in Avengers. What you want is the fun story, and you do get that. That's in the game. The writing is good. It's some of the like quips in Mission are very bad, but like the actual like cutscene, like character dialogue, all the stuff with Kamala is great. She's an awesome character, and it feels way more fresh than you would have imagined from all the like demos and stuff where it just looked like a bunch of movie knockoff characters, because you have this central character in Kamala who is new to most people, certainly she's not a takeoff on any movie character, and you kind of get to see this all fresh through her eyes. It's a real strength of the game, and I'm kind of baffled they didn't tell anyone about it.
Yeah, it's very weird, and it's created this like thing around the game that someone who only played the beta has not bought the main game yet. It's like from the outside looking in, it was like everyone's expectations are really low. The beta hits, people's expectations in many ways got even lower for most of them. Although I feel like I was pretty adamant this is maybe not a very good beta, but this might be a pretty good game. And then the game actually comes out, and the people are like, oh, this maybe is actually kind of a good game, especially if you just play the campaign. And so all the initial impressions from reviewers that were playing the campaign were like, oh, this is actually pretty good, in a way that I feel like maybe is even accentuated by the fact that nobody expected fucking jack shit from this game going in. And so they're like, oh, no, there's actually just like a fun single-player campaign you can do. That's awesome. And now it kind of seems like that everyone's finished the campaign, that maybe the Destiny grind stuff is not what people want to keep on playing forever.
No,
that game.
and it's...
like, yeah, that's I guess part of like my question for you, Jonathan, is now that you've finished the campaign, what are your impressions on it as a games as a service type game once you've gone through all that stuff?
Yeah, so I'll tell you about that, but I just want to back up a second and say, like, before I can talk about that, I just want to talk about the gameplay a little bit, because as you mentioned this last time that you found the beta pretty fun in just the basic combat stuff, and it is. You have 6 characters in the base game. You have Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel. I don't think they've called her Miss Marvel yet, but in the text she's always Miss Marvel. You have the Hulk, you have Iron Man, you have Black Widow, you have Thor, and you have Captain America. So those are your
Captain
6
America's
characters.
dead. You only play as him in the tutorial, Jonathan. He dies. I played that beta. I know what happened.
You know, one thing I do appreciate, though, about the game and, like, the box art and stuff is they don't play particularly coy about the fact that Captain America is obviously in the game. They don't play the, like when the Justice League movie came out and they never put Superman in the marketing. And they're like, no, we made a Justice League movie without Superman. Like they didn't try to pretend that they were going to sell you an Avengers game without Captain fucking America in it. They also, when they do inevitably bring him back from the dead, there's enough time in the campaign left for you to actually like substantially play as him. So like they balance it pretty well. But yeah, so those are your 6 characters. It's kind of like a fighting game in the sense of like the controls are the same for everybody. The X button will always do, this is on an Xbox controller, will always do like your light attack, and the Y button will always do your heavy attack. A will always jump. B will always do your dodge. And then your triggers will do various things. But like every character's version of that is different, and like a good fighting game, it's different enough that like you really feel rewarded for learning the different ones. And as a 3D action game, it works really well. It's really fun to jump between the different characters. They do feel pretty substantially different. I like that they're also kind of paired in that some characters have like a similar version of the same ability that other characters don't have. So like Iron Man and Thor can both fly, and flying is basically the same control scheme. They fly a little differently, like Thor is a little heavier and less maneuverable because he's just hanging on to his hammer, and that's how he's flying, and Iron Man is a little faster because he's got his like jet propulsion and stuff, but they both fly the same way. Kamala Khan and Black Widow both basically have like grapple to tree moves because Kamala she's Luffy from One Piece, she can stretch her arms and grab it, and Black Widow has a grappling gun and she can shoot at it. So there's things like that work well. And then like Captain America and Hulk both have like really big jumps and wall runs. But they're very fun to play as. I think for the campaign, it's actually really advantageous to have 6 characters because you get in the campaign to bounce between them a bunch, and that's just fun. It means that the campaign actually feels much shorter to me than it is because it feels like there's quite a bit of variety, which is kind of funny because once you get into the post-game grind, you do realize that there's not a ton of gameplay variety in this game, but having 6 characters to do those things with inherently makes it feel a little more exciting. And so I really like playing as them. I liked playing as all 6. The one I probably like the least is Hulk because he's kind of just the simplest. He smashes stuff. But the other 5, honestly, I keep going back and forth between who's my favorite. I think my favorite is Black Widow overall. It's that kind of thing where because she has the least like interesting move set in like just an abstract sense, I feel like they worked the hardest on making her cool in the game. And she's very mobile. She's got this like grappling hook, so like you can jump into the air and like press your right trigger and you will just get an airborne enemy and pull up to them and then fight them in the air and stuff like that. Her special moves are really cool. She can turn invisible. There's all sorts of cool Black Widow stuff. Kamala Khan, like I said, she's Luffy from One Piece. She has gum powers. She can make her fist really big and punch people with it. It made me want a One Piece game like this because she's very fun to play as. She's great. Captain America, I initially thought was one of my less favorite ones, but the more I play as him, the more I like him. Like, one of the things they got perfect with Captain America is you can basically do the thing, which happens in the movies sometimes, where you will just throw your shield several times at someone until they die, and it is very satisfying to just throw your shield, catch it, and like hit them in the throat 5 times in a row. It kind of reminds me of like the end of Civil War where Cap and the Winter Soldier are passing the shield back and forth and beating the shit out of Iron Man. You can do that in this game all the time with Cap. His moveset is very fun. Thor and Iron Man are the crazy ones in terms of all the shit they can do, and they're very enjoyable to play as. So they're all great. So that core foundation, and like I think the enemy types are good. I think the combat environments, like all the basic, like how you build a game stuff, the gameplay in this game has a really solid core. But then you do get to the end game grind, and it is, so far I am not bored with it at all because you do open up like several quest chains and stuff that you go through, and I'm still working through all of that, and I'm having a good time. I have not gotten into, I think, the super grindy stuff where you're trying to get like specific chests so you can find specific, dungeons to go do. I forget what they call them, but anyway, to go do. And so I haven't gotten into the full, like, oh my god, I'm grinding, feeling of it. But you do realize once you get into the post-game stuff, it has kind of all the same problems Launch Day Destiny did, which is every mission there's like 2 or 3 things you can do. You either put Ghost down here and fight enemies while they come to you, or you try to get Ghost to like 3 locations and fight enemies at each location. It's kind of like that, but in Avengers it's you put Jarvis here, or then there's a control mode where you have to like keep, it's almost like a control in Call of Duty or something, or in Destiny, where you have to like keep 3 bases from the enemies. There's sabotage where you go in and like blow up a bunch of strike points, and there's elimination where you go and find a high value target and you destroy them. And it does become, okay, there's not a ton of, even if I'm not literally playing the same mission over and over again, there's only so many mission designs. And again, like Launch Day Destiny, there's not like a ton of environments. There's like 4 or 5 big overall areas, and that's where you play everything, and it quickly becomes a little bit like, man, I've seen this thing many, many times. I think the amount of like extra story stuff they've thrown in there feels good. It feels like a healthy post-game, but you do realize that that's a limitation. And then the game is also buggy as hell, and we'll talk about that in a minute because it's funny. But I don't feel that down on it, in part because of like the Destiny experience. Like, The core of this game is really strong. It has a really good campaign. It has good characters. I like spending time with them. I like playing as them. All of the problems, and we'll get to this when we get to the technical stuff too, I think most of the problems Avengers has are very fixable problems. Like, technical stuff is always fixable. You can iron out bugs, you can make performance better. What you can't do is if the game launches and it's just not fun to play, there's really nothing you can do with that. We'll call this the Anthem syndrome, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, this is not an Anthem. This is much closer. Like, this is not as good a game or as innovative a game as Destiny by no stretch of the imagination, but it much more feels like Destiny, where I think it was pretty easy to hold the faith on Destiny that they can get this ironed out because the problems it had at launch were pretty fixable. And frankly, Avengers doesn't even have some of the extreme problems like all the narrative stuff in Destiny that had to have a really massive overhaul. I don't think they have to do that. They've got a good foundation for more stories going forward. And I'm probably going to wrap up all the post-game stuff I want to do over the next week, and then I'll probably put the game aside. And when they add more heroes in, I will happily come back because I really am excited to see what they do with, like, they're going to have Hawkeye. We know they've hinted at doing Black Panther at some point. PlayStation players are getting Spider-Man. Like, I'm excited to see the new characters they add because that's the real appeal of this game. So overall, I'm enjoying it, and I would recommend it. With the giant caveat, should I talk about the technical bugs?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things before we move on to that. Because one thing, having played the beta, I'm curious about how long did it take to fill out characters' skill trees? Because that was something that playing the beta felt like, boy, and it probably was accentuated by the fact that I was playing a beta, so it's like there were only so many missions I could do. It felt like I had played most of the missions, and I was like, man, playing the characters at level 1 did not feel very fun, and then when I got them to like level 6 or something, it was like, okay, now I can kind of see that the combat has something to it, but it took a lot longer to get to that point than it would in, say, Devil May Cry or Ninja Gaiden, where by the time you're at the end of, you've played the game for like 40 minutes, you have unlocked a lot of like what feels like the basic suite of moves you would have, whereas it took like 5 hours, I felt like, to do that for one character in the beta.
So this is, I think, the game's biggest intrinsic weakness, the kind of thing that can't just be ironed out over time. It would take a much bigger rethinking of how the game is structured, which is that having the Destiny style, and with that kind of like Devil May Cry skill tree kind of style thing, in this kind of like grind loop game is weird when you have 6 characters. Because you have to do that whole grind and the loot grind with 6 characters, and there's nothing shared between them. They don't share levels, they don't share gear, they don't share anything. So, like right now, I have Black Widow and Kamala Khan I have pretty high leveled, and I can do most of the content with them. Iron Man I haven't played with in a while, and I'll just give you an example. So there's this is also, it ran into this is the exact same problem Destiny had at launch, where they have both levels, and then they have the gear level, and it is fucking confusing and stupid, and eventually they will have to iron that out. But right now you have your literal levels, which is what gives you skill points for your skill tree, and you have your power level, which is your gear power level. My Black Widow is in the 50s on her gear power, and I think my Kamala Khan is in her 40s, and then they're both around level 20, and I have completely completed Black Widow's basic skill tree, and then there's extra skill tree stuff you can do with your special moves, and I've mostly completed Kamala's, but my Iron Man is still at level 20 in just power, and I think he's at like level 8 or 9 in the skill tree power. So I would have to go get Iron Man and grind him quite a bit to get him to where I could play the same level stuff that I can do with the others. To be fair, all of this happens fast, and I think that's important. Like you will get multiple levels per mission if you're doing a big mission, even at a high level. Like the last thing I played early this morning, Sean, I was playing with Black Widow, and I got like 4 skill points in one mission I went and did. So you get these pretty fast. You get gear, like this game gives you way more gear than Destiny does. You just get a fucking avalanche of it, and you run through it pretty fast. But you have to do it 6 times, and I feel like that is a significant, like the skill tree should just be tied to your overall progression in the game. Like it should just be like you are a overall level 20, and then like each character maybe has a skill tree that you can pick, but it's not tied to your progress with that character. That's dumb. The gear stuff, I'm not sure what the best answer to that would be, but it is a little weird that you have 6 characters you have to do this with, and this will only be exacerbated as they add more heroes to the roster, obviously. So that feels like the biggest weakness. In the campaign, it doesn't so much matter because they very carefully give you time with every character where you're unlocking stuff at a pretty good clip. But, like, you're not going to get to the end of the campaign and have anyone's skill tree maxed out. That's just not going to happen. So, I found, like, Black Widow's second type of bullet only after, which is really cool. It's like you can do, in her main, like, firing with her gun is, like, this kind of rapid fire thing. But then there are 2 others where there's a full automatic, and then there's a power shot, which is more like just a single powerful shot you do. I didn't unlock either of those until after the campaign, and it totally changes her character. So that is probably the biggest problem that this game faces, I would say.
Yeah, because that was my concern. Like playing the beta, is it just felt like, looking at it as the grindy, like Destiny-esque thing. It's like the main thing the game has to relieve that is you have all these different characters you can switch between, but the idea of having to go through the skill, because the basic level of the skill tree for everybody, at least in the beta, was just like everyone had you dodge and then you press light attack and it does a thing, or you hold down light attack and it does a thing, and like everyone had a certain number of the same basic kinds of moves that they could do. They were all just locked behind the first 2 levels or so of the skill tree, and the idea of doing that for every single character just to get them the basic like combo potential, that sounds like something that they like you said, should have been something where the skill points are associated with an account level or something. So that way, which is what something like a Devil May Cry does when you have multiple characters, is you just get a shit ton of currency that then you can spend like individually on whatever character. And like, so if you have 1,000,000 points with Dante and you spend all your 1,000,000 points on Dante, you go to Nero and you still have 1,000,000 points with Nero to spend on him individually. And that alleviates that problem. And that just seems like a really kind of annoying thing for Avengers 2 have done, is lock those kinds of basic moves behind that kind of individual progress for each character.
Yeah, and, at least at the basic level, the campaign will get you all the basic stuff. So if you just play through the campaign, you'll come into the end game with all the basic stuff unlocked. But, like, it's weird to me that I didn't realize Black Widow had multiple unlockable gun modes until after the campaign, Mm-hmm. So that's where it gets, like, an account-level skill tree thing would be fine. And I think the gear grind is mostly okay because you do get gear so fast, but it is, like, it disincentivizes me from playing more with a character like the Hulk, who is not my favorite to begin with, but I do enjoy playing as him. But right now, I'm unlocking higher-level missions, and my Hulk is way lower, under-leveled everyone else, so I would have to go play Hulk on lower-level stuff before I can play Hulk on the higher-level stuff. And I just feel like that's the wrong incentive structure for a game like this. It should want you to switch between characters a lot. It shouldn't want you to, like, pick one main that you focus on. That's not the kind of game this is, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree. It's the kind of thing that if it wasn't a 4-player co-op gear Destiny type game, it would do that, right? If it was just designed to be single player or like a smaller scale multiplayer thing, it would very much be and you can play as any character, and then maybe you unlock a thing where you can jump into any of the old missions as any of the characters, and like the kind of standard thing you'd expect from a character action game, where those games are designed to be played over and over again on harder and harder difficulties already. They're just not associated with like separate grind mechanics like a Destiny is.
Yeah, like, it's impossible to shake the feeling of like, I wish this wasn't a service games. If they had made a campaign that was like, instead of 20 hours, a solid 30 hours, but was a dedicated single-player character action game like what you're describing, more in the Devil May Cry vein, but it was with multiple Avengers, with this combat system that they've built and everything, that'd be a dream. That'd be great. I'm not going to, completely throw out the baby with the bathwater here and be like, and because it's not that, I hate it. There's probably a better version of this game in my mind. What we have, I still enjoy quite a bit, and I'm excited to see how it grows, but yes, you can already see, like, I have to imagine that when they eventually do Avengers the Taken King next year, their big, we're going to fix the game thing, addressing the loot, the leveling system will probably be, like, priority number 1.
Yeah, because hopefully by that point they'd also have, like, 10-plus characters, so it would, as you said, the more characters you throw in, I think the less people are going to want to play 2 hours as Spider-Man just to unlock his like launcher, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. What other questions did you have about the basic game stuff?
I think that more or less covered it. So tell me what's going on with the technical stuff, because I've definitely seen more than a few videos on Twitter. There's one with Captain America and his facial expression that is one of the best glitch videos I've seen, like this side of Assassin's Creed Unity. People don't have faces. So what's going on with that? All that stuff.
Yeah, no, this game is fucked on a technical level. I'm playing on PC, but it is not just a PC thing, in my understanding. I've been talking to people who've been playing it on Xbox and PlayStation, and they're having a lot of the same problems. So I'll just say from my experience, the biggest thing is it just crashes a lot. It's just a game that you will be playing, and it is a hard crash. It is the kind of thing where, like, your game window just disappears and you are looking at your desktop. And it is just, like, instantaneous. Like, you're throwing a punch as Iron Man, and then you are looking at your desktop. And you're like, oh, okay, this just cut the fuck out. And it's not any fault of, like, my computer or anyone else's. If that happens the first time, you go and check, like, were my thermals okay? Oh, yeah, my CPU's at 80 degrees, it's fine. And then, you're like, okay, the game's kind of fucked up. And it's happened to me, like 10 times now. I mean, it's bad. It's bad. It's like, I mean, literally, like, Sean, one night, the night before I finished the game, I sat down to play the final mission. I got about halfway through the final mission, which is a big, long, ending sequence, and it crashed. And at that point, it was like 1:30 in the morning, and I'm like, well, I'm not doing all that again, so it's like I'll finish this tomorrow, I guess. So that happened to me yesterday when I had like finally gotten a group together and we were going and doing a big mission, and like 5 minutes into it crashes, and I'm like, God damn it, and then you have to start all over. So the crashes are pretty frequent. I don't know if those are happening on console as much, but I think I've heard about it. But it's definitely on PC, it's crashing a bunch. It is buggy in a lot of weird ways, like the Captain America video you're talking about, but like, for instance, today, this happened to me twice. There's two, like, the tower in Destiny. There's two of those in Avengers. There is the helicarrier, and then there is the anthill, which is where Ant-Man, who is Hank Pym, and it's like one of the only differences from the movie universe, is it's not Scott Lang Ant-Man, it's Hank Pym Ant-Man, young Hank Pym. And he has collected a bunch of Inhumans in an area he calls the Anthill, which I was really sad the game did not take the opportunity that the Anthill is like literally he's shrunk everyone down and is hiding them in like a cave. No, it's
that's what it was.
I thought so too. It's not. Because
when you said Anthill, I'm like, oh, that's hilarious. Like, yes, it should be literally, they are tiny and they are in an actual anthill where Ant-Man has all his ant buddies.
No, because there's even a plot point that, like, Hank Pym, like AIM did something to his genes and he can't shrink anymore. And I assume that'll be a plot point that when they add Ant-Man into the game, like, he'll unlock it. But, like, for now, he can't do his shrinking stuff. So, also, it's a really boring version of Hank Pym. I don't really get his inclusion overall because it is disappointing. But yes. Anyway, but you have those two. What were we talking about? I got off on my
bugginess and
bugginess. Okay. Stuff. So you have those two. So I'm in the helicarrier today, and in each, this is also one of the bigger annoyances of the games, is there's two, how does Destiny even do this anymore, the faction stuff? But Destiny used to have,
did like a limited version of it in Destiny 2 that was like, hey, for this week you do events and you get points that you can spend on specific gear, but generally speaking, no.
But you remember how Destiny 1 had all those factions you could do, but they were all in the tower, and you would go between the tower vendors and get your faction missions.
Yeah.
In Avengers, this is the most annoying thing about the entire game. There's two factions. There's the Inhuman Alliance, and there's S.H.I.E.L.D. And S.H.I.E.L.D. is on the helicarrier, and the Inhuman Alliance is in the Anthill. You are incentivized to do all of their stuff together, because they're not opposing factions. But to do that, you have to go to the helicarrier, get your missions there. For some reason, the person you pick your missions up from is like, well, the person you pick your missions up from is close by, but the faction vendor who you pick up your rewards from takes like 5 minutes of in-game time to run through on that goddamn helicarrier, because they make you like very slow in the helicarrier, and you can't jump, so like you have to literally run downstairs to go find them. But then if you also want the Anthill stuff, you have to go to the Anthill, get their stuff, and then you can go play missions. It's very annoying. They should all be in one place. Anyway, but on the helicarrier, I went to talk to the lady who, like, gives you your faction missions, and she's like, I forget what her line is, but it's something like, like good going heroes or something like that. And it just started bugging where it just played that line at like a 2-second interval for the entire time I was on the helicarrier. Good going heroes. Good going heroes. Good going here. And it just did that. And it did that twice with like someone else's line as well while I was on the helicarrier today.
Was the like localized to that character, or did the audio follow you wherever you went?
It followed me.
Oh god, that's hot. That is really bad.
Until I left the helicarrier. Once I left the helicarrier, it didn't follow me, but it did that. In a mission, Maria Hill had a line of dialogue that recurred like every 30 seconds, like 5 times, and it finally cut off. But there was, for some reason, one of her like explanation lines of like, here's where you're going, Avengers, and here's what you need to do. And I was like, stop, why are you still saying this to me, Maria Hill? Stop it. So there's just silly bugs like that. And then there are the potentially just full-on game-breaking bugs, one of which I hit, and luckily I was able to progress past. But here's my story of my game-breaking Avengers bug. There's a mission, it's the mission where you get Thor in the campaign, which is actually pretty cool how they bring Thor into the game, or back into the game. But anyway, you get Thor, and you're having this big fight, the helicarrier's in the air, and you're fighting on top of the helicarrier. And I'm fighting as Thor, we're going to fight this big giant robot together, and Iron Man is with me. And while I'm fighting, I see the button prompt for the X button come up, and it says you should press X. And so I press X, and I realize, oh, I'm on this like weird pad, and it wants me to get into Iron Man's big Hulkbuster armor, because Iron Man's big ultimate super is he calls in Hulkbuster armor, and he gets into that. And I'm like, oh, is this like a thing in the campaign where like they're gonna have Thor get into the Hulkbuster armor? That sounds crazy. So I do it. Uh-oh, that's not what was supposed to happen. That Hulkbuster armor was there for Iron Man to get into. The game is not supposed to allow any of the other Avengers to get into the Hulkbuster armor, but I pressed the prompt because it told me to press the button prompt, and Thor gets into it. But wait, they don't have the graphics made for Thor in the Hulkbuster armor. So what it is suddenly, I can't even quite describe what happened, Sean, but like the Hulkbuster armor was there, and Thor's face was like floating on top of it. and then it tried to move, and then the game wigged out and went to like this black screen. And went to this like black screen where like it couldn't show anything. It was still showing like all the like my health bar, all the like enemy indication lights. Evidently I started getting hit because the screen started to glow red, which is what happens when you're about to die. And then it went back into full view, and it was Thor like falling through the world, like the infinite like oh shit, and he's just like floating, and I can't do anything. And then like other random character models were like floating around, but like it wasn't the same environment we had just been in. And so I press start, and I reload the checkpoint. It checkpointed me in the blank black void where I'm dying.
Great.
And so I wait a little bit, I die again, it reloads the checkpoint, I'm in the black void again. So I quit the game, I start the game up again, I go back into campaign. Campaign doesn't have save files or anything, it's just its most recent autosave, that's all you can do. So from the yeah, I fucking hate it too. From the campaign auto menu, there is nothing I can do. I can't do anything. It will only load me into this one checkpoint where I'm in a black, glitched out void and die. And I was about 12 or 13 hours into the game at this point, so I'm panicking. Finally, I realized the only real way to fix this was to go into Avengers Initiative, the multiplayer mode, and like bypass the warnings where it's like, you'll spoil yourself, like don't do this yet. And from Avengers Initiative, I could walk up to the war table and pick that campaign mission I was on, except that campaign mission didn't show up. It only showed me the next campaign mission. So I had to like look it up, and it turned out when I glitched out and died, I was like 10 seconds away from the end of that mission. So I guess that's why it did that. But I picked up from there, started that, checkpointed, exited the game, went back into campaign, and then campaign was back on track, but I had skipped the end of that level. And that is how I was able to continue my progress. But because I did that, all of the post-game like mission chains you unlock were now in my quest log for Avengers Initiative until I finished the campaign and then went over there. So that was kind of annoying. But that is one of the weirder video game glitches I've ever seen, Sean.
Yeah, that's impressive. Because I remember, because you made a tweet when that happened, and I remember seeing that tweet, and I was going to respond to it saying that, well, this is exactly what happened to me. The last time I played a fucking Crystal Dynamics game, when I played Tomb Raider in like 2015 or so,
Yes.
like the great, the Tomb Raider incident of 2015 that then caused us to eventually play Cyber Sleuth, because that was the reason I bought Cyber Sleuth, was because I was going to finish Tomb Raider and the save file had corrupted. So I'm like, well, they did play something else. I like Digimon. And so it all worked out for the best. But by the time I was going to make that tweet, you had tweeted that you had resolved the problem. Like, well, I'll just say this on the podcast then, eventually. Because I don't know what it is with Crystal Dynamics, but because generally speaking, their games are not that buggy, but, fuck, dude.
I mean, there is no such thing as a good version of an only autosave save system. It will fuck you inevitably. Yeah. So don't do it. Just don't do it. At least let us, there should have at least been an option in campaign to, choose my mission, restart the there's no restart mission button. There's only restart checkpoint.
Yeah,
so
it's infuriating. It's because I mostly associate that bullshit with Ubisoft, but lots of other video game companies do it as well. Yeah, and it's just so annoying. I guess I could I'm guessing the reason why Avengers is doing that because it's the service always online thing. But if you have this whole campaign mode, there's no reason not to with that campaign mode. Or like you said, at least give a restart mission rather than a restart checkpoint option.
Yeah. So that was wild. It's buggy. I've heard that if you buy the microtransaction cosmetics at your own risk, because apparently there's a bunch of bugs around those where you'll buy them and then you won't have them.
That's a great bug to have.
Yeah. So, I mean, don't buy microtransaction cosmetics anyway. That's my other big complaint with the game right now, is that there are a ton of costumes for every character, and there's a lot of cool ones in there, and I've unlocked almost none of them. And I've played 25 hours. I have 3 or 4 cosmetics for every character, and most of those are just the ones you unlock through campaign. From what I can tell, most of the cosmetics are microtransactions. It is on the one hand, yes, the microtransactions are all cosmetic, which is better than the alternative, but also, most of the cosmetics are microtransactions, and that sucks for a game like this, because part of the fun of a superhero game like Spider-Man or like Batman Arkham City or something is all the different costumes you get, and there's just not a lot right now from that I've unlocked. And after 25 hours, I should have more. I should have my a fun, one of the ones that I'm seeing that I could get if I had enough of the in-game currency, and I don't know how to get more of this particular currency, is there's one where Hulk is dressed like a 1930s gangster and he's got his top hat and tweed suit. I want that, but I need I've been at the same level of that in-game currency for several days now, and I don't know how to get it beyond microtransactioning it. So that's dumb.
Yeah, that's particularly frustrating in a game that's already charging you $60. It's I get that they need to come up with a monetization path, but I'm with you, Jonathan, that for me it is a standard, necessary thing for a superhero game that you should have a shit ton of costumes, because these characters are, the oldest characters in that game are 70 years old or more. With Captain America, you have a ridiculous library of really awesome alternative costumes to pull from. And particularly Spider-Man is probably the best superhero game in that regard, because it's got 20-something costumes in it for free. And then they put in a bunch more if you bought the DLC. But yeah, not having a bunch of cool cosmetics is really frustrating in a game like that.
Really frustrating. The only super cool alternative one I have for anyone is for Captain America. I have his 1940s World War II costume, which is what I have on all the time because it's cool. But other than that, I don't have I have several versions of Miss Marvel, but it's just with the lightning bolt, with a different lightning bolt. The latex is shinier in this one. It's okay, give me something better.
Yeah, because that's in the beta. They should I don't know if you could really unlock any of these, but in the beta I kind of looked through because they had a limited thing that you could see what some of the costumes were, and it definitely was it's a tiered rarity system. So it's a bunch of them were here it's just basically the normal one, only it's slightly more purple. And then you've got the epic ones or whatever that are a full different costume. So it seems it's nice to get the slight color variation, but what you want is I want this crazy looking Captain America outfit that was in one issue from 1984 or whatever that was on a cover in this 3D modeler took it and made it into a cool video game model like the Cyborg Spider-Man one. That's what you want.
So, do I recommend Marvel's Avengers? It depends. I think, the real recommendation is listen to everything I just said, and if that sounds like something you want to play it. I think for most people, I would say wait and see on the bugs, for one, and wait and see what they do to kind of evolve the game over time. But I'm in a much... I do really like it. It's a lot of fun. I wouldn't have put in as much time as I have if I didn't like it. So, I'm much more positive on it than I was pre-launch, where it kind of looked terrible. It's not terrible. It's quite good when it's good.
Yeah, overall, I'm really happy to hear that it is, because I knew playing that beta, it was obvious to me where some of those issues were going to be, but it's good to know that some of my hopes for the game have proven true. I think I'm going to do what I said I would do with the beta and wait, probably forward, see what they do with the next gen versions of that game, wait for it to go on sale and pick it up when Spider-Man comes out.
Yeah, I think waiting for the next gen version would be good, because on PS5 or Series X, presumably they'll also have cleaned up a lot of it, the technical stuff, by the time they're making a next gen version. So, and maybe you'll get some... I don't think any of the DLC with the new characters is paid, but maybe some other stuff will be included.
That's part of what I think they use to try to justify gouging people on the cosmetics, is that they are going to put out all the characters for free.
Which is good. So, we'll see. All right. You want to move on to the news, Sean?
Oh yeah, what's going on in the news, Jonathan?
Well, we got our first Nintendo first-party centric multi-game direct in I don't even know how long, since early this year, maybe one of the Animal Crossing ones, with the Mario 35th anniversary direct. So it was all one character, it was all Mario, but we did get a proper Nintendo direct. So they announced most of this. There were some surprises, I should say, but most of this had been long rumored, but we finally kind of got the confirmations. So let me run through what they announced. Super Mario All-Stars, the original Super NES game that compiled Mario 1, 2, 3, and the Lost Levels with all the redone graphics. That has been added to the Super NES Online app for Nintendo Online subscribers. That's awesome. They've never put Mario All-Stars out on Virtual Console or anything like that. The most they've done is a re-release on Wii that was a full-priced game, basically. And I've been playing through that, and I love Mario All-Stars. They announced a Mario 35 Battle Royale game, which is kind of like Tetris 99, but it is Mario for the 35th anniversary. It is you playing the original Mario Bros. Against 35 other people and seeing who gets the best score. They announced a Mario Game & Watch mini console, which has not gone on pre-order yet in the United States because it has to go through the FTC, but it is a little Game & Watch console, like the original Nintendo handhelds, but it plays the original Mario 1 and 2, the Japanese 2, Lost Levels, in color, and it has some other little mini games and a clock and stuff. That's going to be $50. They announced Mario Kart Live, which is a toy car. It's not quite Toys to Life. It's more like an AR thing where the cars have a little camera on them. You build little racetracks, and then you use the Switch, almost like a controller for a remote car, mini car kind of thing, but it shows up on your TV. Not something I'm interested in, but seems fun for the kids. They announced Super Mario 3D World, which was the Wii U game, is getting a port. Finally, that's one of the last big Wii U holdouts. It's going to be called Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, because there's apparently a new mode called Bowser's Fury. They've actually made some substantial changes to the game. In the original 3D World, you had 3 levels of running, and it took a while to ramp up the character into the full level of run. They've cut all that. You can just run in the game. So the game literally is faster now, and there's some other changes they've made. But that's coming out in February, I believe. And then the big star of the show is Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which is a compilation of Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, and the original Mario Galaxy in one package, coming September 18th, which is in a week. It's coming the end of this week, September 18th, 2 weeks from when they announced it, so right around the corner. Mine is pre-ordered. And that was all the news at the Mario 35th Anniversary Direct. Sean, what did you think?
Most of this stuff is kind of whatever, cool, All-Stars on the SNES app is yes, put that out there. Mario 35 Battle Royale, I looked at, I couldn't understand really what it was watching the video. I'm sure it makes sense when you play it, but it was they only showed a brief thing of it, and it was okay, I guess when you kill enemies, they pop up on other people's screens. I don't know. That seems like that might be cool. They've put the last bullet in the Wii U by porting 3D World because Pikmin 3 is going to come out soon and 3D
Yes.
World. And I believe that's basically it, right? Is there anything else left on the Wii U that is like an exclusive that people would want moved?
So there is, in terms of like games original to the Wii U, no, unless you count Paper Mario Color Splash, which I would love to see, but I don't think that's okay. They don't need to move that one.
I don't think that's quite at the level that I'm thinking.
No. The only other one would be the Zelda remakes, Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. But those were not, originally Wii U games, but those are ones that I think people would like on the Switch. But yes, in terms of the original Wii U first-party titles, and even some second and third party, like we had the Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE came earlier this year. Yeah, it's definitely the final big bullet into the Wii U's head.
Yeah. So, but the thing at this direct that I find the most interesting is 3D All Stars, just because there's a lot of like weird. I don't know how do you feel, Jonathan, about like what they showed in terms of what it is, in terms of like a repackaging of those games?
Yeah. So it is, just to describe to people, it is pretty straight ports that have been upscaled, and like there's definitely been some work done on them. I think the initial reaction of a lot of people was like, oh, that's just the exact same game. And when you actually see, people have been doing like videos of the head-to-head of like what footage we have from 3D All-Stars with like original like N64, Mario 64 footage, and it is upscaled and like into HD and cleaned up more than I think people realize. I think you should look at them next to each other, and like Mario 64 has always been, it's a 480p game. Even in emulation, it's been a little fuzzy. And all of that kind of fuzz is removed. It is a much sharper, cleaner, brighter version of that game, and this is also true of Sunshine and Galaxy. Sunshine and Galaxy have been opened up to widescreen and 1080p. Mario 64 is still in 4:3, its original aspect ratio, and it is in whatever the HD for that. It's like 720p, but to 4:3. And yeah, I think I'm 100% fine with that. I will say that's like basically what I wanted, and I'm cool with that. I understand the instinct of like wanting more fulsome remakes, like something like a Mario 64 completely redone would be cool. I do think it's a little weird they didn't open up Mario 64 to widescreen, because there's already a port on PC that fans have made that does that, and I don't know why Nintendo didn't do that. That's the biggest head scratch for me. Everything else seems fine. I think my big disappointment is no Mario Galaxy 2. Yeah. Mario Galaxy 2 is the best 3D Mario game. It's one of the best games ever made. I don't know why it's not in this collection. I don't know why when they did their big Mario sizzle reel at the end, that was the one Mario game they forgot to show was Galaxy 2. They can always add it later. They can always re-release that on its own, but it is a little disappointing that it's not in here. Overall, they could have done even less and gotten me excited because I'm a huge Mario fan. I think it's on the bare bones side of what they could have done. There's no doubt about that. I think at a full $60 for these three games with minimal work done to all of them, I think that's a lot. I think this should be a $40 package. If it had Mario Galaxy 2, or if Mario 64 were redone more, then I could understand the $60 price point. I'm someone who really loves those original Mario 64 graphics, so having just a really nice, clean, sharp version of it is something I'm totally cool with, but I do understand some of the disappointment. And then we're going to have to see how they all like run and everything. Sunshine had really bad frame rate problems on the GameCube. Is that all clear? If that's gone, that's great. That makes that an extra definitive version. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, and that's kind of like my feelings looking at it. Is it just feels like it looks like a fairly low effort package in terms of what they're doing with it, and it's disappointing, especially when Activision of all companies has been doing so well with these really lavish remakes of their games. So like they did the Crash Bandicoot one, which was all three original PS1 Crash Bandicoot games completely remade, and that package was $40. And then they did the same thing with Spyro, 3 full Spyro games completely redone with modern graphics, $40 package. Same thing with Tony Hawk's Pro Skaters 1 and 2, where they remade the games. They put in a lot of the mechanics from 2 and 3 into all the stuff with 1, and added in like multiplayer modes and all this kind of cool stuff. But all the content of both of those games plus more fully remade for $40. And then Nintendo walks up and here's a $60 package with 3 of the 3D Mario games two of the ones that you want, one of the ones that's like, I guess this is fine for historical purposes. But I'm looking forward to all the, the retrospectives on Super Mario Sunshine, where people who haven't played that game since they were kids play that game as an adult and realize, oh, maybe the people have been defending Mario Sunshine. That game fucking sucks. That game has some serious problems in terms of its design. And so all that, and then you don't get, it's the like, it's like almost vaguely insulting that Mario 64 is not even widescreen, like the level of like so little work done. The fact that, at least based on the footage they showed, 64 in Sunshine are only 30 frames per second, and Galaxy is 60, because Galaxy was always 60. But Sunshine was supposed to originally be a 60 frames per second game, and then it was very much not. And so they bumped it down to 30 frames per second, and it couldn't even, as you said, maintain a solid 30 frames per second in certain areas of that game. And so it just feels like, when you look at what's being done in the remake and remaster market, because not even like the Activision ones, if you look at the stuff that like Capcom puts out with the Mega Man collections or the Street Fighter collections, and they have, they're not going and doing a lot of work to those games, because that's not the point of it, but they do have this like hours and hours of archival content that you can go and enjoy. And it's like one of my favorite things with that Street Fighter collection that I bought was just going through and looking at all the crazy stuff that they had put in there. And all this cool background information and pixel art and like weird obscure magazine covers that had been done by the original illustrator and stuff like that. And then looking at this package that they are trying to sell for $60, and it's so minimal. And for it to be this like 35th anniversary Mario celebration, it feels like, man, Nintendo, like you're sitting on like if you wanted to do the cool museum feature, think about all the stuff that Nintendo has access to that they could do to make that, and the fact that they do like nothing with it just feels such a wasted opportunity.
I agree, but here's the kicker, Sean. This thing is going to sell more than every package you just mentioned combined, and double it, and it's not going to reach the. I mean, this thing is going to. It's already sold out on Amazon and Walmart. I think was the numbers that I most recently saw. The physical copies. Like, this thing is going to sell a ludicrous amount, and Nintendo knows that. That's why they can drip feed fucking SNES games, and they still have never done 64 games on the Switch, and they've never done GameCube games outside of the fucking GameCube. There's no, there is so much of their content, and because we're starved for it. This is something that I'll admit, with all of that you just said is true, I'm still really excited to play this next week, And
I'll tell you, Jonathan, with your PC, you can play a way better version than Super Mario 64 right now if you want to.
No, I know I can. And I've been thinking about that. But Sunshine has never been re-released, and Galaxy, and we should say, for good reason, yes. But for historical purposes, it's nice to have. Galaxy, when you talk about this being minimal, it's so minimal, I'm pretty sure this is just if you didn't know, Galaxy had a Chinese port to the NVIDIA Shield tablet, which uses basically a very similar processor to the Nintendo Switch, similar to the Tegra chip it uses. And I think this is just that port, which apparently was a pretty good port. It looks very nice in 1080p, but this is not something new Nintendo went out and made. This is their Chinese port that they're giving to everyone. So Sunshine is the only game they've put any substantial work into on this collection, and it's Sunshine. It sucks. So yeah, no, I agree. I think the version of this that would be up to par with what other people are doing would, it would include Galaxy 2. Everything would be in widescreen 1080p.
60 frames per second.
60 frames per second minimum. The Switch can't do more than that, but you know what I mean. Yeah, it would at least have that. It would. I think the question of whether you would remake the graphics in 64 really is a personal preference of do you want that or not.
Do both.
Do both. Sure.
Do both.
Yeah,
Halo Anniversary, I think, set the standard that's you should provide both. There should be whether it's you switch between them on the fly like Halo Anniversary Collection did. And I know that not all the Activision remakes have done this, and I wish that they would. You should include the original versions of the game, even if it's just a super bare bones port. There's no reason not to put both in there.
Yes. So I agree, and it should have all of that. Nintendo should be an industry leader on this, and instead they are a kind of distant follower. And as you say, there are There is a full native PC port of Mario 64 right now that is 4K widescreen. It's not emulation, it's a port. And you can do all other kinds of stuff with it, and Nintendo isn't up to that level yet with Mario 64, and that is kind of insane. And yet, just I love my Switch. I love playing games on that thing. Having these 3 games on there is awesome. So it is the perpetual dilemma of being a Nintendo fan. Yeah.
Although we haven't talked about the most bullshit part of this, which is that it's only, at least, I'm sure there's going to be some other catch to this, because of course there's going to be. But so far, what they have said is that this package is only going to be available until March 31st, 2021. Same thing with Mario 35 Battle Royale.
Yes. I don't even know what to say about it, because it is so bizarre. I've never seen a video game company do that. It's like the old Disney Vault strategy that Disney doesn't even use anymore, because artificial scarcity is not something you can really do in the online age.
And yet
they're trying. Because here's the thing: when they said that in the direct, I initially heard that as, the physical boxed copy will only be sold until March 31st, and I thought, okay, that I'm fine with that. That's fine, whatever. But no, they're saying that they will pull the digital version off the storefront. You'll still be able to download it if you own it. They've confirmed that they're not going to pull it off your Switch, but it's very weird. I can't imagine that actually means Nintendo will just cut their own sales off. The best theory I've heard is they will start selling the 3 games individually after that date for $25 a piece, and so it would have been a savings to do it for $60. But what the fuck is the point of that? It's a very weird move.
I mean, the point of it is it is the point of any kind of limited scarcity thing. It is to force people to want to buy it, which is especially insulting when it's such a low effort kind of piece of shit collection you're throwing out there that is the bare minimum you could expect. And then you're now you have to, if you want a physical version of it, you better fucking buy it right now. And so it's something for me, who does not own a Switch but might want to buy one in the future and really like Super Mario 64 and would love to play Galaxy, because I've never actually played that one. Will I be able to buy those games if I get a Switch in the future? Because I'm definitely not getting a Switch between now and March 31st, 2021, because I'm going to be buying a new console between now and then. So it's fuck you. It's just so baldly predatory as a business practice to do, to create this weird pressure on your consumer base to buy this thing and to artificially boost the sales in this time period. It's especially when it's fuck off. It's not even this big, lavish, limited edition 35th anniversary thing. 35th anniversary is just an excuse to put this out, but it doesn't have the feel of, here's this big, special anniversary release of a game that you could understand a physical release being limited. It doesn't even make sense for the physical release to be limited in this context.
No, it does not. So, anyway. I mean, I had fun getting all my Mario news. I am enough of a Mario fan that this excites me, even if it's kind of crap. And I don't know, maybe I need to go to therapy for that. But, it is what it is. That's Nintendo for you.
I mean, because I'll be honest, if we had done this podcast last week, I probably would have been way more angry about it, because it made me weirdly upset to see how, it feels like Nintendo so little fucking cares about their own history to do this. And it's just you are the most important company in video games that still exists. Please care about your history, because if you don't, nobody's going to care about the history of this medium. And it really annoyed me right after that announcement.
It's a fair reaction, and they have lots of cool stuff they could do. I mean, let's just put it this way, Sean. This game is named for Super Mario All-Stars, which set the standard for all video game remakes to this day. Super Mario All-Stars was the Super NES remake that literally redid all the graphics of the original games. And I probably prefer the look of the original NES Mario 1, just out of nostalgia's sake and everything. But it's a really cool visual remake with a bunch of fun touches. If you've never played All-Stars, there's a cool thing where when you meet the Toad who says our princess is in another castle, there's another Toad in each world, and they're making little shapes to all fit in the room. And by the time you get to World 7, there's 7 Toads stacked on top of each other, and all these kind of things. And then for Mario Brothers 2, the American one, and Mario Brothers 3, those graphical rehauls are so good they're so fulsome, they're so beautiful that those are, I think, largely considered the definitive versions of those games. That's what was released for the Advance games, the Game Boy Advance ports. So it really set the standard for that. And there were several SNES games like that in the time. Dragon Quest did 1, 2, 3. That never came out over here, but they did something like that as well. And so this is much less than that. This is comparatively much, much less than what they did on the Super NES 30 years ago.
Very annoying.
All right, you want to talk about this one? I think is unambiguously cool.
Yes, this is a cool announcement.
Nintendo announced a new Zelda game this week. They announced Hyrule Warriors: Age of Calamity. Hyrule Warriors, if you remember, is the Musou game that came out back in the Wii U. It has also been ported to the Switch, and that was the big Musou Zelda game. And this is another Hyrule Warriors, but it is a Musou prequel to Breath of the Wild. So it is set during the war with Calamity Ganon 100 years before Breath of the Wild. It uses the Breath of the Wild art style, and it's a pretty convincing imitation. It looks really on par with that original game. But it's a big Musou game where you're doing the big war with Calamity Ganon in the Musou, million enemies style. You can play as all the champions. You can play as Zelda. You can play as Link. And it's got that story hook of, you're going to lose, because that's the whole lore of Breath of the Wild. It's coming November 20th, and it's honestly one of the most anticipated games of the year now for me, because this sounds like a great extension of Zelda and one of the best excuses to do a Musou game I've ever seen.
Yes, although I'm very curious how a Musou game can possibly narratively justify you losing, because those games are very much... you just murder everything in sight, and they all fall before the sweep of your blade, and it is just a ridiculous power fantasy, which I am all here for. I'm very curious how you do the Red Dead Redemption ending, but in a Musou game sounds hilarious to me.
Yes, but it looks really cool. It's got phenomenal cover art. If you haven't seen it, it's actually one of my desktop backgrounds right now because it's such a cool image, and that's coming November 20th. So that seems cool. And they're not predatorially telling you can only buy it between now and March. So that's nice.
Yes, Nintendo is a company of multitudes. They can do good things, and they also do bad things.
Speaking of which...
Speaking of companies doing bad things.
You want to talk about Ubisoft?
Oh, Ubisoft. Oh, it's been a little while since we talked about them.
All right, so there's some Ubisoft news. We're going to talk about it. I do want to stress, first and foremost, that these people are still a bunch of disingenuous shitheads. Yves Guillemot should probably lose his job because since we last talked, it has become abundantly clear that he knew fucking everything and has done nothing and has been a nepotistic bastard. And I kind of hate this company, and I don't imagine myself buying most or maybe any of their games in the near future because I find it kind of gross, but they're important to the industry, and there's some interesting news here. Does that about sum it up, Sean?
Yeah, I do want to specifically point out, because I remember when we talked about the Ubisoft stuff at the previous Ubisoft Forward, which was their not E3 2020 event that came out after a month basically of a sweep of different accusations all across the board of different people at Ubisoft doing all kinds of really rotten shit, that we talked specifically about where Yves fit into it, and there just wasn't a lot of reporting at that time that indicated his relationship to that stuff. And now it is abundantly clear that he was heavily involved in most of the high level stuff that was going in that company, and was aware of all that stuff happening and chose to ignore it. It is Ubisoft, and I never realized this before all this stuff now, that Ubisoft is not just Yves Guillemot, but it is his family, is the full company. And so it's his brothers, and then their children are all up in the upper echelons of that company, which is, not uncommon because nepotism is the standard practice for huge companies, but it is also a clear cause for having a company structure that is rotten to the fucking core, when it is all so inside, that it's not just an insular upper structure for the upper management. It is so insular that it is a literal family structure, which there's nothing that can come from that in that kind of setting. So fuck Ubisoft. I didn't watch this event because it just felt weird. I'm not, it is important news to talk about, but this company sucks.
This company sucks. And frankly, most of what they showed, there's only one thing I'm interested in from all of this. So, all right, Gods and Monsters, which was the Breath of the Wild ripoff game that they announced a couple years ago, that has been rechristened as Immortals: Phoenix Rising, which sounds like the fifth best card battling microtransaction phone game of 2017.
And I have to point out, Jonathan, you have actually misspelled the title of the game in our notes because it is Phoenix spelled Fenyx, not Fenix, as you did here.
So I got the wrong misspelling.
Yes, you got the wrong bad spelling. Immortals Phoenix Rising, I have no earthly idea what motivated them to make this name change. Gods and Monsters is such a better name for this game. Immortals Phoenix Rising is like the spin-off of the spin-off of the spin-off of some garbage tier 80s cartoon that is like a revival novel that you find half torn up at the bottom of like you have thrown in the trash in the corner of a Goodwill. It is such a terrible fucking title for this game. What on earth possessed them to do this? It is beyond my fathoming. I just don't understand how this title change happened.
It is weird. But this game is coming December 3rd for every console under the sun. It very much looks like Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild meets Assassin's Creed Odyssey. This is the same team that did Odyssey. It has basically similar combat to Odyssey, is what I was reading from journalists. The open world puzzle stuff and art style is all taken from Breath of the Wild. There doesn't seem to be an original bone in its body, but it looks kind of pretty. I will not be playing it, both because it is Ubisoft and because it's coming in the middle of the craziest season for video games I've ever seen. But
yeah, it's also like the narrative context for it is it's all Greek mythology stuff. And the trailer they showed, because I watched, this is like the only thing out of this event I really watched a little bit of, because like, oh, I'm curious what this game is. And like the cinematic-y trailer they showed that gave some like the narrative setup, I was kind of disappointed by the really jokey tone it had. It felt very much like Disney's Hercules TV show kind of interpretation of Greek mythology. And it's just like, I really like Greek mythology and I wish that they would take itself a little bit more seriously. But if you're calling it Immortals Phoenix Rising, I guess it is the tone I would expect of a game called Immortals Phoenix Rising and not necessarily of a game called Gods and Monsters.
Yeah, there you go. All right, this one's kind of cool. They are doing a remake of Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, the classic game adapted into the Jake Gyllenhaal movie that no one remembers.
Yes, they did make that. Yes, you were correct. That was a movie that happened.
Jake Gyllenhaal, the Prince of Persia. Because I don't know about you, Sean, but when I think Persia, I think Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Jake is a traditional name in the royal family in the Persian region. So, yeah. Makes sense.
Yes. All right. But they're doing a full remake. It's coming January 21st. They only announced PS4, Xbox One, and PC. They did not announce the new consoles, which I think is bizarre. It'll also include the original 1992 Prince of Persia game, like the old Mac Prince of Persia, as an unlockable bonus. Seems kind of neat. If you want to play Sands of Time again, though, and you don't want to give Ubisoft an egregious amount of money, I do want to point out that the original Xbox version of that game is on sale this week for $3.99 in case you want to get that on your Xbox One or Xbox One X. And then
Sands of Time Sands of Time is a fantastic game. That game is incredible. Yeah. And if people are if you like Assassin's Creed and you want to see what was the primary predecessor to Assassin's Creed at Ubisoft, that's what Prince of Persia: Sands of Time and its sequels were.
Yeah, so I might just get that original Xbox game, which on the Xbox One X runs in native 4K anyway, so who cares? All right. This is the only thing I thought that I will actually probably buy is after years of being delisted due to rights issues, the cult classic Scott Pilgrim vs. the World game. That was a Xbox Live Arcade 16-bit style game that came out around the time of the movie, the Edgar Wright movie, although it's more an adaptation of the Brian Lee O'Malley comics. It is finally getting a re-release as a complete edition with all of its DLC. It's coming to all systems this holiday. That game it was only on sale for like a year before it got pulled, so people have been wanting that game relisted for a very long time. Even Brian Lee O'Malley, the comics artist, has been kind of asking for it, and apparently he got cut out of the loop because Ubisoft's been working on this for a year. It just never told him. So like this summer, he was doing tweets being like, yeah, I would love to see it too, guys. Ubisoft should do this. And apparently someone at Ubisoft tweeted at him like a winky eye, like, we're doing it. And he was like, oh, this seems cool. And then he later found out they thought he knew and just no one had never told him, which I think is funny.
That's very weird.
But yes, this is finally coming back, which is cool.
Yeah, that's cool. I never played that game. I'm not like a big Scott Pilgrim guy, but I remember that game being very well liked. And then, like you said, it was just like disappeared after a very short amount of time.
I like disappeared games coming back because I like video game history, as we just talked about with Mario.
Yes. One day somebody will buy PT from Konami and PT will be a thing again. One day it will happen.
All right. And the biggest news, Sean, the most exciting, I think one of the coolest things Ubisoft really has ever done.
It's the most Ubisoft thing ever, this whole thing they did with Watch Dogs.
Really, you could say this is their apology for all of their misbehavior. Watch Dogs Legion is getting Aiden Pierce as an added DLC character with his own story campaign post-launch. Now, if you, like me, don't have any idea who Aiden Pierce was, even though you played 40 hours of the original Watch Dogs, he was in fact the playable main character of that game, who was considered such a drag that many reviews commented that he single-handedly sank that game. But yeah, he is their big hook to get you to buy Watch Dogs Legion and keep it.
This is so hilarious to me, of Ubisoft just completely failing to read the room on Watch Dogs as a property, that this would be the thing they do. Because I never played Watch Dogs 2, but I know that game is fairly well liked in some communities, and particularly people seem to like Marcus, who's the protagonist of Watch Dogs 2, quite a bit. And for them to bring back Aiden Pierce and not bring back Marcus from Watch Dogs 2 is so fucking funny. Watch Dogs 1 being like, for me, like an infamous game in my memory as a game that we all really looked forward to as the first big next-gen game. It was going to be like, oh my god, like it was announced, the first time it was shown off at E3, it was before the PS4 and Xbox One were officially announced, but everyone knew it was being worked on. It was a very like wink and nod. Oh, this game, yeah, this is just one more thing we have to show, and it was clearly a game that couldn't run on the 360 and PS3. And then it got delayed outside of the launch of the consoles, and it was just so highly anticipated Watch Dogs, and then it came out, and it was such a colossal wet fart, such a just nothing fucking game that I only played, I think, about 10 hours and then quit, and somehow, Jonathan, you powered it through. It is one of my favorite podcast memories, is you talking about the whole last half of that game and explaining to me what happened to it on a podcast like 6 years ago. But yeah, Watch Dogs was a bad game. Probably one of the worst pieces of it was Aiden Pierce as a character and the whole story around him. Just a like completely not self-aware walking parody of like angry male like white dude protagonists in video games at the time. And so them bringing him back, thank you Ubisoft for being a shit company that apparently is also just making shit decisions in their video games.
Very weird. All right, finally, we have been wondering for years, where is Skull and Bones? Skull and Bones was announced at E3 2017 as the spin-off of all the ship mechanics from Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, the best Assassin's Creed game. We had never heard of it again since 2017. The entire Trump administration has gone by. Hundreds of thousands of Americans dead. Regions of the world destabilized. And no news of Skull and Bones. But now we have heard of it again because there was a message on their Ubisoft blog from director Elizabeth Pellin. She confirmed it is still in active development, writing, quote, "We dreamt something bigger for Skull and Bones, and these ambitions naturally came with bigger challenges. These difficulties resulted in necessary delays. Critical questions needed to be addressed over the past several months, such as, how do we modernize the classic pirate fantasy? How do we ensure a more immersive and visceral experience? How do we create cool and memorable moments in-game? For most of these questions to be answered, it was clear that we needed more development time." She says they've also done a bunch of hiring, so she herself, for instance, joined as creative director in 2018 after that announcement. and they've really revamped the entire team. She says they will re-announce the game in 2021. So the answer is Skull and Bones is going to be a thing, but it is not the thing we saw in 2017. They've basically relaunched that whole game. But it's good to hear from it, I guess.
I mean, that makes sense to me because the original pitch of that game, because this is something that was not clear by the initial announcement in the trailer, but then after the fact, it came out in interviews that game was designed to be a multiplayer game, and it was going to be a games as a service, big multiplayer thing, and with no single player story component to it whatsoever was the original pitch, and everybody, myself included, was like, well, that just doesn't sound like what I want out of this game at all. So my guess is it is probably a completely different thing. It's still a pirate game that has the pirate mechanics, but I'm guessing it's a big, slightly closer to that Assassin's Creed 4 style single-player story-based experience, even if it has the multiplayer stuff in it. I'm guessing that they're pretty heavily retooling it to be a little bit more what I think most people envisioned the game would be based on that initial trailer.
Especially because they're very different games, but Sea of Thieves kind of ate their lunch on that, where it came out. And Sea of Thieves didn't set the world on fire, but it has a small but enthusiastic game base, and it's, as a multiplayer pirate game, I feel like it kind of cornered that market. So it seems like, if I had to guess, they're kind of trying to make this another franchise pillar for Ubisoft of this will be their pirate series, which I could get into if it's good, but I'm glad they didn't just put it out in what we had seen before, because I don't think anyone really wanted that. So
yeah.
And maybe it'll have Aiden Pierce in it too. Maybe there'll be a time travel DLC where he comes back from the future and becomes a pirate.
Yes, put Aiden Pierce into every Ubisoft game. Make a For Honor 2, and it's Viking Aiden Pierce. He's the new operator in Rainbow Six Siege. They're going to make a new Splinter Cell finally after... it's been 7 years since Splinter Cell Blacklist came out. They're finally going to make a new Splinter Cell, but it's not going to be the Sam Fisher. It's going to be Aiden Pierce with the fucking goggles.
All right, you want to talk next-gen consoles, Sean?
Yes, let's talk about this surprising news that nobody saw coming, that Microsoft apparently was making a whole different SKU of their Xbox. And man, this just really came out of nowhere. We never knew that this was going to be a thing. The Xbox Series S. What is it, Jonathan?
Well, a year of leaks culminated this weekend in another round of leaks that just full-on showed the announcement video of the Xbox Series S before Microsoft was ready to show it.
It was a true leak coup de grace. It was the finishing blow that Microsoft had just delayed this official announcement for months and months and months, because it had just been a whole series of not only leaks about the console, but of leaks from insiders saying June is when they're going to do the Series S event. No, it got pushed to July. No, it got pushed to August. And then it's probably going to be sometime in September because it's got to be, right? And that was the last we'd heard about it. And then finally the final stroke of the axe on the announcement of Series S came.
Along with a report from Windows Central also leaking the date and price of the Series X. So basically, all of this came out because Microsoft had pushed it back so far. I'm kind of surprised the same thing has not happened with Sony. But Sony doesn't seem to be as leaky a company. But I think Microsoft responded to it well. They had a funny tweet with the little monkey gif of the puppet looking over his shoulder. And then the next day, they formally announced it all. So the Xbox Series S, what is it? It is a small, actually really small, it's 60% smaller than the Series X, all digital system with no disk drive. It is spec'd for resolutions up to 1440p, probably more of a 1080p console, but otherwise it is very similar to Series X. It is the same SSD, it's half the size, it's 512 gigabytes, but it's got the same speeds. It'll do most of the same stuff. It'll have most of the same features like the multiple suspend resume stuff. It should be able to play all the same games. But it will cost $299. It is coming November 10th, and the Series X will also launch that same day, November 10th, for $499, which means we finally know when a next-gen system is coming out and how much it'll cost. And honestly, I think it was interesting that Microsoft decided to play so coy with the Series S, because I would say this was pretty unambiguously received positively, Sean.
Yeah, and it was both received positively, and it just feels like this was basically what the price thing had to be, right? Like I think everyone has just assumed for like months at this point that both these things would be 500. Like I'm assuming we'll get the PS5 price next week and it's going to be $500. Because that's just what makes sense based on all the stuff we already knew about how much it costs to manufacture these things, because that's selling it at a small loss. And $300 for the Series S is a very aggressive pricing point, and they are losing more money on that. All indications are than the Series X, because it certainly is the cuts they have made are not significant enough to be a $200 difference. But it doesn't make sense to only be $100 cheap. I don't think you could push this thing as $100 cheaper, because the cuts they've made from a consumer perspective, I think, are too severe for that $100 for a hypothetical $100 difference. So it just kind of has felt like this is the kind of thing it would have to be. And it's just it feels so anticlimactic, It's just this is how it happens. It's just it got so pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and delayed and delayed and delayed, and then it is exactly what you thought it was going to be all along. But yeah, I think people have responded to the announcement fairly positively. It seems like a pretty smartly positioned device. I'm curious about some things around it, because there are a couple of other kind of nips and tucks they've made around the edges. The CPU is basically the same. It's slightly underclocked, and that's probably not going to be a big deal. But I have seen multiple game developers tweeting about the RAM setup, because it has about 8 gigabytes of usable RAM, which is not a huge amount. That's about half of what the Series X has, and it's 2 gigabytes less usable RAM for games than what the Xbox One X has. And so that seems to be a point where I'm curious to see what impact that's going to have on, because that's not a thing that I think is going to scale quite as cleanly as some of the GPU resolution stuff. But that's basically what they're positioning it as, right? They are positioning it as, the idea is you scale back a little bit on stuff like the CPU, and you scale back a lot on the GPU. So you can put out games that are going to be largely the same. But ideally, the main way in which they are worse than the Series X version is just that the resolution comes down from a 4K resolution to, they kept on saying 1440p. It's obviously aimed at people who do not own 4K TVs, and it's a 1080p device. And it seems like a pretty smart thing to make, and be able to get out there for, the price point of a Switch is a really impressive price point to be able to have this kind of device at.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, I've really learned this in the last couple of weeks owning a PC now. Resolution is by far the biggest impact on performance. If you are trying to get a higher frame rate or better graphics or something, dropping the resolution is the quickest way to do that when you're futzing around with settings. Resolution, especially once you get past 2K, which is 1080p, and you're going up to 4K. 4K is not 2 times the resolution. It's 8 times. It's this exponential jump. So it's a really big leap, and 4K is really demanding. And a lot of the horsepower in those new next-gen consoles is there to get that 4K reliably and solidly, because, the PS4 Pro mostly cannot do native 4K. It's mostly doing checkerboarding and upscaling. The Xbox One X can, but it has to make other cutbacks. 4K is tough. So doing a system that just saying, okay, not worrying about 4K, no, that will not account for everything going on here. As you say, the memory is the biggest thing that I'm curious to see what they do with. But it really is spec'd all around for 1080p, and it seems like that is also kind of their overall, how they're marketing the S versus the X, is it's the same thing as the Xbox One, where the Xbox One X does 4K and the Xbox One S did not. The Xbox Series S will not do 4K either on backwards compatible games. So, it will not have the Xbox One X enhancements, because it is kind of underpowered relative to the Xbox One X, but the architecture is more similar to the Series X, so that's how it is still part of this generation. Still things to learn, but overall, it seems like a smart way to do this, and I think this will be something very easy to recommend to people. And this is where I think everybody doing all these announcements so fucking piecemeal confuses me, because you know how we had the big not E3 Microsoft event in July?
Yes.
And I think everyone said, I said this, everyone noted this, that as a pitch for the Series X, it wasn't much of an event. The one big exclusive they had is not coming out anytime soon, and that's Halo Infinite. But as a pitch for Game Pass, it was actually a really good advertisement, because they were able to say, hey, we're going to show you 90 minutes of games, and every single one of these will be free with Game Pass. It was a really good pitch for that. And now you have this system that is all digital, that's only $300. And if you can recommend to someone, hey, here's this system, buy that, get some Game Pass, and then you can just play all that on there. And if you don't care about, maximum resolution, you're not going to mind much. It's a very easy recommendation. And like, if they had kind of paired those announcements, I think they would have been in a better position, because that's kind of what this is for. And I think it's a smart thing to have on the market. A lot of people do not care about 4K. Even if you have a 4K TV, I think there's a lot of people who are not going to notice the difference, especially more casual gamers. Obviously, if you are someone who knows what a 4K game looks like and cares, this is not for you. But I think it's for a lot of other, maybe even as a secondary console, if you want to play some Xbox stuff but are mostly a PlayStation gamer. It's a smart thing to have on the market, and that price point is awfully aggressive. So there you go.
Yeah. The things I'm curious about it are like, because there's a couple of things here of how it's going to perform in this generation in the long run, right? Like what impact is it going to have? Because I think there's one chink in the strategy that Microsoft has in terms of the 1080p 4K split, is that I feel like since the PS4 Pro, Xbox One X, and it's like 4K games have become a more common thing, I feel like what everybody is trying to do is find ways to get most of the benefits of 4K without actually brute forcing native 4K resolution. That's explicitly what the PS4 Pro was designed as. It was not designed as a console ever to run games in native 4K. It was specifically designed as a console that ran things at a higher resolution than 1080p, but would then use checkerboard rendering to create an image that is more similar to 4K. You've got all the DLSS stuff, which seems crazy on the NVIDIA side, that they have basically AI image reconstruction that they do to render something at a lower resolution and then use AI image reconstruction to make the image look closer to native 4K. And everything I've seen of like the latest version of that, like there are some Digital Foundry videos, probably the most recent one to watch for that would be the Death Stranding PC release that has that. And the performance gains you get are so massive with a very minimal performance very minimal difference between the image quality of the reconstructed image and the native 4K image. So I feel like outside of this initial cross-gen window, I'm not really expecting games to actually try to be native 4K on the Series X and the PS5. And if they start being like what the Unreal Engine 5 demo, which was 1440p reconstructed up to something that looked a little bit more like 4K, I think using some checkerboarding or something like that. If that's what you're at, then you're talking about with the Series S a sub 1080p resolution for it to be able to run a game theoretically at the same performance level. And I'm curious what the impacts of that are going to be, right? Like, are people going to design games so that that doesn't happen for the Series S and they are designing it as like the Series S as like the floor? Or is it going to be a little bit more what's happened with the One X and PS4 Pro, where it feels like people at the end of this generation, developers have kind of left some of those base consoles behind on games because those base consoles just are so weak that they're like, whatever. Like if Control runs like complete fucking absolute garbage on the Xbox One and PS4, that's fine. We'll release the game anyways. I'm really curious to see what happens in that regard.
I am too, and this is what I meant about 4K being just really pricey in terms of your hardware. That's why, like NVIDIA, if we didn't talk about this, but we could have, like NVIDIA announced their new line of graphics cards, the 3000 series. And the 3000 series, they're really going all in on their DLSS 2.0, which is basically a way to get the benefits of 4K visuals without the performance cost of 4K. And if NVIDIA is like going all in on this with, $1,000 graphics card, that tells you something, that 4K is just, it's a price that is so huge to game performance that a lot of developers and gamers would rather not engage with it, and I've definitely seen that just in my own experiences in the last month or two doing some PC gaming. That's where you really get the squeeze. My brother has a really powerful PC and sees that with 4K as well. So the DLSS stuff is very exciting, and I'm sure the Series X and PS5 will have a lot devoted to this as well. And yeah, so that's the question. But it's an interesting thing to have. It's something that, as far as we know, PS5 is doing the slightly cheaper, we assume, all digital version, but it's otherwise an identical console. So they're going to kind of be in this space, that $300 price point, on their own. So that'll be interesting to see how people account for it and how popular it is. Anything else to say about the Xbox?
I'm just glad that the shit finally is out there. It feels like it getting leaked is the way that it always had to go, right? That it's eventually you stall it for long enough people in the chain get access to this information, eventually it gets out there. And it sucks for the people at Microsoft that like put all these plans into like a whole marketing, and they're going to have a whole fucking event and all this shit. But at some point, you just gotta let the cat out of the bag and let people know what all this stuff is.
Speaking of which, Sony is holding their PS5 event this Wednesday, September 16th. It'll be at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, assumedly to announce the price and release date of the PS5. Their press release only notes that they will have updates on the latest titles from Worldwide Studios and our world-class development partners. So we will also be seeing games. It's going to be a 40-minute presentation, they say, but we assume, if we don't see the release date and price, then I don't know what to say. I think that's probably what this is.
It would be very weird, especially since Microsoft stuff is already out there. I'm not sure what they would be waiting for. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't see a possible reason why they wouldn't announce price and release date here.
Yeah. So do you have any predictions, Sean? You said, so do you think it'll be 500?
Yeah, I think 500 for the disc version of PS5. Like, I hard stake on that. Like, I really strongly believe that's what it'll be at. For me, the question is, are they going to go really aggressive with the digital-only version and price that at $400? Which obviously they would be taking like a $50 or $70 extra loss on that, because ripping out that disc drive is like a $20 saving. So they would be taking a bigger loss on that. But I'm curious to see if they would want to price it that aggressively, which I'm kind of vaguely leaning more in that direction, because before I would have said 500 PS5. 450 for the digital only version. Now I'm thinking Sony might want to push it to that $400 price point, because I think that would make the Series S a harder thing to recommend.
I think that is probably right. Here's the thing. I think the most likely, the modal outcome, middle of the bell curve, is $499 for the disc console, $449 for the no disc. I think what you're saying is also possible. And I also think it's possible that the no disc version is $499 and the one with the disc drive is higher. Because we know just how fucking expensive this thing, like especially the bespoke SSD and everything. And Sony don't give a fuck. We also know. I think there's a world where it is $499 with a disc drive, or $499 without one and $599 with one. Hopefully not that wild. I think that's less likely. But I do think it's possible that if it has the disc drive in it, it's above 500. But I do think the most likely outcome is the normal console is $499. So we will see.
Yeah, like I would be pretty surprised. Like I could kind of see the $550 for the disc one. I absolutely would not expect. If they charged $600 for it, they would be making a profit on each console sold, and I absolutely don't think they're going to do that. That would be nuts. They've never actually done that. The PS4 was like a tiny loss, but they didn't make a profit at launch. It took like a year or something for it to make profit. So I would be very surprised, because the Series X is, based on what we've seen, is a more expensive console to manufacture. Like, yes, the PS5's SSD is more advanced, but it's also an 825 gigabyte memory size instead of a full terabyte. The Series X, and the Series X does have a more expensive GPU and CPU. So the Series X is a slightly more expensive console in terms of the bill of materials than the PS5. So that's why I just don't see it being more expensive. It just wouldn't make sense to me for Sony to price it that way.
Yeah. No, I agree, and that's why I said I think the most likely outcome is it's the same price, but you never know. So And sometimes Sony's weird. Do you think we'll see any? Do you think we'll see more Miles Morales at this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that's what the event is, other than like them announcing the games and stuff. I'm guessing that it is. They're going to show Miles Morales because they've never really shown that game outside that trailer. The like Insomniac Twitter account every month or so tweets some new factoid about it. I think they did a tweet the other day that was like, "Hey, there's puddle ray tracing. We do the stuff." But there's not been any substantive like footage of that game. So I think we get that. I'm hoping if Demon's Souls is a launch game that gets confirmed and we get like footage of that. And I don't know if there's any other launch game they have. I mean, they have that Astro Boy thing that comes installed with it. But I'm guessing we get at least footage of Miles Morales and Demon's Souls and confirmation, either that both of them are launch games or that maybe Demon's Souls is like February or something.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for video game stuff. Anything before we move on to TV and movies?
I want consoles. I want the new consoles so I have something to distract myself from the hell that we're living in. So please put them out. That's what I want.
I mean, I have plenty of fucking games. I'm okay if I don't. I still don't know. I think if the only PS5 launch game is Miles Morales, I will probably wait because my November and December are too busy anyway. If Demon's Souls is also November, then I'm crunched. If Demon's Souls is February or March, then that is when I will be buying a PS5. So we will see. But yeah,
I want the shiny new thing. I want it, so I have the shiny new thing, and I'll play the Spider-Man, and then I'll play the slightly better Cyberpunk or something on it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, because Cyberpunk isn't getting the actual full next-gen upgrade until next year, but it'll probably run faster.
Yeah, it'll run faster and probably be at like a slightly higher resolution. I'm guessing, I'm assuming it'll probably have dynamic resolution scaling.
Yeah. All right. So they're making a Shenmue anime, Sean.
Yeah, this is a weird announcement that just kind of came out of nowhere because there had been some sort of like scuttlebutt, like if someone had said something about like there's going to announce Shenmue 4. And everyone was like, I don't think they are. And then it turned out, I mean, they're not. They're announcing they're making a Shenmue anime. That's weird. That's cool.
This was at Crunchyroll, had a big conference event. It's a 13-episode anime. It'll stream worldwide on Crunchyroll. It'll also air in the U.S. on Adult Swim. It'll be directed by Chikara Sakurai, who directed Season 2 of One Punch Man and did key animation and animation direction on several episodes of Naruto and some of the movies. We don't know much more than that. Yu Suzuki is involved, but they're making a Shenmue anime, so that's kind of interesting. I have never played Shenmue. I might be more amenable to just watching the anime because I don't play a really old game that is kind of hard to get into for me at least. I've tried a couple times and I respect it, but it's a lot.
I like Shenmue. I feel like for me, if I was going to do a TV version of Shenmue, honestly, I'd rather have like a super melodramatic live action J drama, rather than like you can make your Shenmue anime and that's cool.
I think you're right.
But the style of Shenmue it's not like Shenmue's not very anime to me. I don't associate with like an anime style aesthetic. I want a dude with slicked back hair and a brown leather jacket. And him like crying, like and trying desperately not to cry, thinking about his father while he's like sitting on a swing in the snow. That's what I want from a TV version of Shenmue.
Well, now we're announcing our Kickstarter to make the Shenmue J drama directed by Sean Chapman.
Yep, we're all moving to actual Yokosuka, Japan for a full year. Been hiring Japanese actors. This is why I've been learning Japanese actually for years. It's the whole reason why I started studying it. I had a dream. I had a vision that I wanted to make a live action Shenmue, and it's finally happening, but only with your help.
Yeah, we're just going to need $20 million.
Exactly. And also the names and addresses of and how to contact people in Japan that can make TV stuff.
Yes. All right. Did you see the trailer for the new Dune?
I did indeed see the trailer for the new Dune. I watched it now that I'm working at a school again. I watched it in my customary manner. I watch all this kind of stuff. It is how I'm going to watch that PlayStation thing while I'm eating lunch at my desk at school. And it was, this is the trailer for Dune, and it looked cool.
Yeah, I actually wasn't going to put this on the timeline, and then I remembered you've actually read Dune, and I think you are more into that than I am. I've only seen the David Lynch movie once. I don't think you're like a Dune maniac or anything, but you like Dune, right?
I like Dune a lot. That's a great book. I love that movie. I don't know if I'd call it a great movie, but I sure do like it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it looks good. It very much looks like the kind of big... I mean, it is interesting that it feels like WB just, like, fucking poured... Or I don't know if it was WB. Whoever is doing Dune poured a shit ton of money into this thing. It looks like the giant, crazy production that, like, you know, I think Dune fans have wanted. It's great cast. That's the thing that struck me most from it. And it looks good. The sandworm at the end, that's a big-ass sandworm. But, you know, it's not going to have, you know, Kyle MacLachlan fighting Sting, you know, or anything in it. So
yeah, you're not going to have Kyle MacLachlan like whispering in narration weirdly for no reason. My name is a killing word. The whisper narration is my favorite choice of David Lynch movie because it creates a very particular mood.
A choice that I don't think David Lynch made because it was all added in post after they cut half of the movie out and made him do all the exposition as narration.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, but yeah, I mean, the trailer looks like it's a fairly straightforward adaptation of the book. I am kind of curious how Dune, just like straight Dune, is received by a modern audience. Just because that David Lynch movie is very weird. And some of that is because it's a David Lynch movie. Some of that is because it's a David Lynch movie that got fucked with in production. And then some of that is because Dune's weirdly, like, really fucking weird. Like, Dune is a strange Golden Age era sci-fi novel, like, right at the tail end of the Golden Age of sci-fi literature. And so it's, like, a weird book. It also does, like, it's undeniable that it is, like, a white savior narrative, like, trope. Like, it leans into a lot of that kind of stuff that I think... I don't have a big problem with when engaging with that novel because it is very much of the era that it was written in. But I'm curious to see how modern audiences react to that. Like, I think it is notable that they don't have like people of Middle Eastern descent playing the Fremen, who are the natives of the desert planet Arrakis in Dune. Like, that feels like a weird choice in some of that kind of stuff. I'm curious how that is received by a modern audience that maybe doesn't have the context of the original to kind of like ameliorate a little bit of that stuff.
Because it's also, I mean, the whole point of the original Dune, though, the big kick at the end is that it's a kind of horrifying version of the white savior trope. Yeah. It has this ending where the punch is like what Paul Atreides has become is terrifying, and I don't know. I think Denis Villeneuve, who's directing it, is an interesting choice for it in terms of someone who does big, heady, weird sci-fi after Arrival and Blade Runner 2049. I do think the lack of people of color among the Freemen in the trailer is a weird choice for what the book is about. But we'll see. I really wanted to do the Dune trailer as an entree into our last item this week, which is I just wanted to give an update on movies in 2020. Because it's a weird thing.
Yeah, because, you know, I feel like because last time we had a podcast, like nobody had really tried the movies yet, and they were like everyone was gearing up. I think it was when we talked about the whole movie releases for the year has felt like this constant. Oh, we're gonna do it. No, we're not. Oh, no, we're not. Yeah, we're gonna do it. Nope. Now we're gonna do it, and then they did it, Jonathan. And how has that gone for them?
Well, so I should say last time New Mutants had come out, and that was the big one. That had yes, New Mutants came out the same week we did that last podcast, and New Mutants did 9 million total for its opening weekend, which is not a lot. To be fair, I don't know if New Mutants would have done more in a non-coronavirus setting, but in any case, New Mutants was the new release. They also, Bill and Ted came out to theaters as well, but that was also on VOD, and I think most people chose to watch that on VOD because that's more responsible and everything. But New Mutants was theaters only. Then last week, Sean, was Tenet, the Chris Nolan movie, which Chris Nolan, on a blood jihad to get that movie into theaters at all costs, finally strong-armed Warner Brothers into putting it out, I guess. So Tenet did come out in U.S. theaters, only theaters, no VOD, not even drive-ins. He would not allow drive-ins to show it because Chris Nolan is militaristic about this. At least New Mutants was at drive-ins, which are safe, but nope, Tenet only in theaters. It had a weekend total of 20 million. Now, 20 million is very bad for a new Chris Nolan movie. It is not as bad as I think the worst case scenario could be for a movie during COVID, considering theaters in New York and LA are not open right now. and other theaters are operating at reduced capacity, and obviously people are scared to go to the movies. But obviously 20 million is not good either. You are not making a profit off of Tenet opening at 20 million. You know, maybe your hope is it does well in the weeks to come because there's no competition. But that was a $250 million movie. It was this giant fucking production. It's like the most expensive thing Nolan's made outside of Batman. And it made 20 million in one weekend. And then the worst case scenario appears to have passed, where this weekend Warner announced that it will no longer reveal box office numbers for Tenet. That is more or less unprecedented. We always know box office for movies. Obviously, it's not a good sign. If it had stayed at or risen above that 20 million mark for its second week, they would have told us. So it's not doing well, which means that there's a test case finally, and now I think everyone's realizing, okay, there is no benefit to having theaters open because that's all we're going to get. So at the same time, WB pushed back Wonder Woman 1984 all the way from October 2nd to Christmas Day, December 25th, is what they're staking now.
Because we all know that the first thing that Santa Claus is going to bring on Christmas is a vaccine for COVID. That's how it's going to work, right?
Yes, exactly. So what else is scheduled for this year? I looked through what major releases are left, and we'll see what people do with them. Death on the Nile, which is the new Hercule Poirot movie, the sequel to Murder on the Orient Express, the Kenneth Branagh one, that is still scheduled for October 23rd. That's Disney via Fox. Black Widow is still on the calendar for November 6th, also Disney. No Time to Die, which is the new James Bond movie, and Soul, the new Pixar movie, also Disney, November 20th. West Side Story, also Disney via Fox. That's the Steven Spielberg remake. That's December 18th. Dune is December 18th. And also I didn't even know this was a movie, Sean, but they made a sequel to Coming to America, the Eddie Murphy movie.
With the one from the 80s?
Yeah, it's called Coming to America with a 2, the number, instead of 2. So I do like that already. I mean, I like any number-based pun in a title. That is also scheduled for December 18th. So yeah, what if any of that is going to come out? I mean, I think right now it really is a wait and see. I think with Wonder Woman is a guaranteed $1 billion movie for Warner Brothers. I do not think they are going to put that out if the chance is that it gets Tenet-style box office. I think they will wait. I think, by Christmas, will they be able to do that? Probably not. If miraculously they are, then that's when we'll see it. If not, then I think Wonder Woman will come out next summer. I think that'll be the next time they push it to. All this other stuff, I don't know. The problem with Black Widow is that Marvel's stuff is starting to pile up. It was supposed to be Inhumans in that November date. And the more they push everything back, the more Marvel is just going to have movies sitting on the shelves. So I don't know. Are they going to do with Black Widow what they did with Mulan and have it be the Disney Plus thing? It's actually hard to tell how Mulan has done because Mulan has courted a lot of controversy from being propaganda of the Chinese government shot near and around concentration camps for Uyghur Muslims. So Disney fucked up everything with Mulan. Will they do that with Black Widow? I don't know. Disney has all these other movies. I think Soul, the Pixar movie, they will do the Disney Plus thing for because it's a kids movie and that's easier to do it with. I'm not sure what they'll do with that Hercule Poirot movie. That was a Fox movie, which means there's probably existing licensing deals that make it hard to not put it out in theaters, but I think they probably push it back. West Side Story, I think they could wind up doing I don't know. That's Steven Spielberg. I don't think Steven Spielberg will want to do a VOD launch. So I think that movie gets pushed. I think No Time to Die is a big question mark because a lot of the main markets for James Bond are okay to have movies. Like the UK, a lot of Europe. James Bond does really well around the world. America is not necessarily the main market for James Bond. I think No Time to Die probably does come out in theaters here. And I'm just very... but I'm not sure. It might get pushed. It might not. My bottom line is I think a movie will be in theaters. If a studio has a reasonable expectation, they'll make something like normal box office off of it. If not, it'll get pushed, and that should probably be a rule of thumb. Some movies, some studios are in a better position to put on VOD. In some cases, they're not. And I think, I think if someone says, I want my movie in theaters, I think that is a totally reasonable statement as long as it is followed by, therefore I will wait until it is safe.
Yeah.
You know, if that's the case, that's if Warner Brothers wants people to see Wonder Woman in theaters, I want to see that movie in theaters too. If that means pushing it to next summer, great. That is the responsible choice. I have no problem with that. If Chris Nolan had said at the whole beginning of this thing with Tenet, I really want you to see this in theaters, and therefore I have asked Warner Brothers to wait until it is safe, nobody would be angry at Christopher Nolan. But it's what he's done, which also sank his own movie. No one's going to remember this movie because no one was able to see it, and the whole story about it was that people were getting COVID in theaters. So there you go. That's movies in 2020. There probably will not be any more in theaters this year.
It just has seemed like a complete and utter train wreck. I don't know. I saw like the concept that a new Christopher Nolan movie has even come out is just so like foreign to me. I'm not a huge Christopher Nolan guy, but like Tenet would have vaguely been on my radar in the parallel universe where none of this was happening. And it just feels like, I mean, honestly, like my only vague memory of it is like seeing, I don't even remember what the last movie I saw in the theaters was, but the last time I saw a movie in movie theaters, Tenet played as a trailer in front of it. I mean, fuck, it was almost maybe like Star Wars or some shit. That's a life. Remember when Star Wars Episode 9 came out, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Do you remember that that's what we were really annoyed about? But yeah, so it's like, other than that, it's just been utterly off my radar. It's been interesting seeing the Mulan stuff happen, which like some of like the bullshit around that movie has nothing to do with COVID-19 and all that, but it has definitely felt like, because what is the deal with that? Did it released in theaters overseas, but it was only VOD over here? Is that how that went?
Yes, in countries where it could support a theatrical release, like I think China, it was in theaters. In the U.S., it was not in theaters, and it was only on Disney Plus as a $30 individual purchase.
Yeah, because like one of the things I've seen about it is like obviously there's the controversy of, I mean, effectively them facilitating human rights abuses through their movie production, which is always a great thing you want to have associated with your movie. But then also it releasing in China, I believe I saw something that like its numbers in China just being garbage and that everyone in China hated it too. So it just feels like them kowtowing to the political situation in the Chinese government has not helped them in the Chinese market either. And it just seems like that, like the live action Disney remake thing has been a like tried and true thing for them for the past several years as just like a fucking money printing machine alongside the MCU movies. And this just seems like Mulan. I'm curious if those Disney live action movies, if they do any more of those after this, like once things go back to what we would recognize as a pre-COVID status quo, it just seems like the Mulan stuff seems really fucking bad to me.
Well, they've already got a bunch in production. I mean, the difference is, you know, they make The Little Mermaid. They're not making it with the Chinese government. So, you know, they're not pissing off an entire culture of 1 billion people and also participating in human rights abuses. So, although I'm sure that Little Mermaid remake will be in and of itself a human rights abuse.
But like the other, and obviously the least important part of it, but part of it is everyone seems to just like not like that movie, right? But my impression has been that those movies generally have been okay to bad, and now it's just but they made a shit ton of money anyways, and it just kind of feels like I wonder if people are now just like, no, we're good, we're done. I think
Lion King may have broken the fever. Okay. I think that one really may have like it because it made a decent amount of money, more than decent. It made like $1.2 billion. It's the highest grossing animated movie ever. They'll call it live action. It's not. It's animated, but it was the Lion King. It could have done bigger, and I think it was just such a nothing of a movie. That's a movie no one like even their Aladdin remake. People still talk about. It had interesting things about it. It had Will Smith, but. You know,
I think you're right, Jonathan, because I had forgotten that had happened until you said the Lion King remake. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. So maybe I think you're right. I think that maybe was the one, because for a long time, I feel like the energy around those movies was people like not necessarily liking them, but like they're just being this weird energy of like, but we're all going to see it anyways, even if we know we're not going to like it. We're all just going to see it. And they would make like $1 billion. And I'd be sitting here as someone who doesn't like classic Disney all that much and just be like, what are you fucking people doing? And then finally it's coming around and I feel like everyone is now on my side of like, why are we watching these movies?
Well, I'll put it this way, Sean. I think if if Mulan had been, if there was no COVID-19 and Mulan had come out in March as planned, and it was the only big theatrical release for that week, I think it would have done fine, because it would have been just another movie in theaters. People like going to movies. You know, it doesn't necessarily matter what the movie is that week. It's just something people go do, and it would have filled in that bubble, and a lot of people would have seen it. When it is supporting the entire movie industry as the big VOD experiment via Disney Plus, like brand new distribution model, a movie of this budget has never debuted on VOD before. No, of course it's not going to support that. You know, like the Pixar movie, I actually think will be an interesting experiment for that, because it's an original Pixar movie with by Pete Docter, who's a great director. But Mulan was never going to be that. So yeah. So we'll see. Anything else we want to say this week, Sean?
Don't go to the movie theaters, but
No.
maybe play video games, but not
Yeah,
Ubisoft ones.
that's the theme of this pod. I feel like we're ending on a down note. I feel like I should have ordered the outline differently. I don't know.
Yeah, you know, it's I don't know if there's a way not to end on down notes. I don't know. It's, you know, it's the world we live in. Everything is literally on fire in most places of the country. I think the Colorado fires are starting to die down now. I mean, none of them were near where I live, but it was, you know, Colorado had some of the biggest fires it's had in modern history. The entirety of the western coast in America is on fire. Everybody's getting sick. But we are going to find out how much the PS5 costs next week. So that's something to look forward to.